Hello there, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the canon, and the High Republic of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
Good, but I can't help shaking the feeling something's different today. I don't know. I mean, I got a haircut, so that's
Oh
nice.
yeah,
But
Looks
You,
good.
something's different.
you
Oh, hi,
had a fight
Dominic.
with the weed whacker. Have a bit of a razor. I don't know. There we go. There we go.
No.
This week we are going full podcast Harriet with a look back on live action Star Wars in 2022, Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and of course Andor. To help us out, it's our great comrade of the podcast Harriet. You know him as the host of our flagship pod, the Star Wars Underworld. I know him as the guy who buys me beer sometimes. It's Mr. Dominic Jones. Long time no see.
Yeah. It's been less than 24 hours since since we said goodbye on the subway train last night. Yeah, it's great to be here. Excited to look back on 2022 and discuss all of the various Star Wars TV shows. It's kind of surreal to think that there were three live action Star Wars TV shows and an animated anthology all in the same year. There was a time when one of those would have been a big deal, and to get all three, and yet we still will sit around and go, why isn't there a movie too?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, here's the trivia question. How many films have there been?
Yeah,
films have there been?
Well, and you know, you say trivia, and really, you say you invited me on here to talk about, the year that was Star Wars on screen. Really, what I'm here for is to accuse Matthew of rigging Star Wars Underworld Trivia Championship, so that Ben would win for a second year in a row.
That's exactly what happened.
You gave him the answers ahead of time. You made it so it was all Clone Wars. You called up Dragon Con, and you called up Dragon Con, and you said, "Hey, Mr. Dragon Con, could you please make all of this stuff that only Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy, would know?"
I wish I had that much clout. Can you actually figure out how to get that much clout? Maybe I'll get some advanced review editions from Del Rey.
If I ever get to come up with the questions next time, I'm going to throw in stuff, because I know deep stuff that like only people who spend all their days on Wikipedia would know. I have no life.
Just the thought.
Ben's gonna know them somehow. It's like just some way he's just gonna tune in. You're gonna ask the question. You'd be like, in 473 BBY, there was a Jedi Master named Steve, and he sat on the Jedi Council, and he was sitting to the left of him was an Ithorian who was missing one eye. How many toes did he have? And Ben will just be like 9, and he'll win somehow.
So we're gonna get to 380 BBY in a short little bit. What Dom is talking about, if anyone's confused, is this past Thursday I was welcome back on to, speaking of the flagship podcast, to lead their annual trivia, and we chatted a bit about what's her name? Patty Jenkins, that person. Talking a bit about her tweet. Well, Joel will get you to chime in with your thoughts in a bit, but yeah, we mostly dove into the trivia. Was the Dragon Con entry test, which was, I will admit, easier than normal years. Ben won again, at least this round. We gotta get Hannah to compete to round up the scores. So we're figuring out how to do that.
I can beat Ben. I bet I could.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
You should take the test, Joel, and see what you wind up with. Yeah, because I think it would be very interesting. We'll
figure out just how to do that. First, we'll get the plugs out of the way. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Iron Canon Pod. Thanks to everyone over on Twitter watching us right now. I hear our numbers doing pretty well there, and of course on Twitch at Iron Canon Pod as well. Tractor Beam every Friday come out on Wednesdays. And then I read them, and then I tell you what I think about them on Fridays, over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This week we had Bounty Hunters number 29, pretty interesting setup issue, and the Insider short story, The High Republic Tales of Enlightenment, A Different Perspective by George Mann. And I dive into a little bit of a sermon, a bit of theology time on the path of the open hand and their philosophy. And so took some time to do a bit of that, go back to my For Christ's Sake Anakin days, and give my thoughts on this deeply theological idea. that I find very fascinating. We can also touch on that a little bit in this episode just for a bit. Joel, why don't you talk about some of the Discord and how to get in touch with us, and if there's an event you'd like to plug over there.
Yes, join us on the Star Wars Underworld Discord, where we chat all sorts of things Star Wars related, and even a few sports related things on the Venn diagram with 2 ends. But if you are interested, this Friday at 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, my time, that is, I forget what time it is you guys.
9 p.m. Eastern.
9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you. We will be playing Fall Guys on our Discord. Well, not really on the Discord. You have to have either a PS4, a Switch, or a computer, but we can all play together. Join us, though, on the Discord chat rooms where we can all chit-chat, have some fun, chit-chat some Star Wars, other nerdy stuff. It starts at 6 and pretty much goes on until The Last of Us leaves. So trust me, I mean, last time me and 2 other dudes were just there, just chit chatting until midnight my time. Nice. So we stayed up quite a long time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're excited. There should be a link in our video. I believe it works. If not, just you can PM us on Twitter. I'll give you a link.
I've been told that there is a permanent Discord link now.
Yes, we got one now. We've been getting
theoretically.
I think I put it on our YouTube description. So I think I did that.
Again, try it out if you want in. Give us a shot. Give us a shout out on Iron Canon Pod, Twitter, Instagram. If it doesn't work, and we'll hook you up there. Also, this is the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. So again, Monday nights we got Iron Canon. Thursday nights we got the flagship. And of course here we have YouTube memberships. We have super chats, different ways of getting in touch with us. We also, of course, have comments. As we can see, our friend Din wants to go see Avatar tonight. Last of Us starts in January. Okay, fair enough. I mean, Joel, you want to say how that'll work with the Discord event?
Well, no, I mean that I'm talking about The Last of Us in terms of the last people on the chat. But I think Doc's talking about the show that's based on a video game with Pedro Pascal in it, which is supposed to be really good.
Yes, that's right. Fair enough.
Or is it a movie?
Yeah. Anyway, fair enough. Sounds like a show. So yeah, different ways of getting in touch with us, getting in contact with us. If we try and get to as many comments as we can, if you give us a super chat, we will definitely get to you as soon as we can. Different ways of supporting the channel, supporting both podcasts and the network as a whole. Okay, let's get into it. Our week in Star Wars. I'll go first. And as you can see, The Last Jedi at 5. And on just the other day, or it would have been Thursday, was the 5th anniversary of this incredible, perfect, beautiful film. Thanks for review. And I posted on Facebook. I posted, okay, remember, this is a perfect film. Inevitably, I was expecting it. I'm kind of happy it happened. Just some friends in Star Wars, outside of Star Wars fandom, chimed in with their usual takes. And my point being, it's still just this glorious lightning rod. I think that is exactly what Ryan Johnson. I don't know what J.J. Abrams was trying to do with The Last Jedi. Ryan Johnson was trying to do with The Last Jedi, of challenging people and their perspectives on what a hero is, what fandom is, what Star Wars is, and it's still unsettling people. It's still challenging people. It's still delighting some people, and I'm happy that it's still. I frankly, I know it caused so much rancor and so much tension, outright toxicity, but there's I'm quoting the Bible right now. Let everything that can be shaken be shaken, and it shook the fandom, and it jostled some things loose that I think needed to get jostled loose. And I hope I'm a better Star Wars fan for having seen The Last Jedi. I don't want to speak for either of you on that point, but from the moment it came out until now, I've been utterly in love with that film, and it's one of my favorite films of all time. And so congrats to Ryan Johnson and everyone for making that one. Last Jedi at 5. If you guys want to chime in, thoughts on Last Jedi at 5. And of course today is Rise of Skywalker at 3, which, Joel, I know you enjoy more than others, but what do you think?
Force Awakens at 7.
Force Awakens 7, around this time, It's getting to it's December. It's late December.
They're growing kids. They're
Growing
growing
kids.
Take a picture.
No, I'll throw this to you first.
Right.
Last Jedi at 5. Any kind of quick thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
it's great to be able to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the end of the Skywalker saga. Uh, no, look, the Last Jedi is a challenging movie. It's a like you said, it's a movie that's made to be different. It says its sort of thesis in the trailer, which is, this is not going to go the way you think. And that's what it did. And I'll be honest, for me, it took some getting used to. When I saw it on opening night, I didn't vibe with it. It wasn't my favorite Star Wars film. And I do value the opening night experience. I don't think that just because I felt that way on December 15th, 2017 means I still have to feel that way. I feel like sometimes we as fans of stuff get locked into an opinion and we have to just hold on to that opinion and never change it, never evolve it. And the movie grew on me. And where now I consider it, it's in the upper half of Star Wars movies for me. And I think there's so much in that movie that's worth considering and worth expanding on in ways that haven't been done yet. So yeah, I think it is sort of the best distillation of what Star Wars can be and what it should be going forward of anything we've seen on the big screen, at the very least, in the last little while. And I'll say about Rise of Skywalker too. I got real fond memories of Rise of Skywalker. I got to go see that movie at the world premiere, and that was a hell of a lot of fun. So even if I I don't care for it as much, and I rank it firmly at the bottom, I still got some warm feelings whenever I look back on seeing it and look back on those times around it. So it is what it is. And Force Awakens, solid, love it. Still just a rocking reintroduction to Star Wars for a new generation. Can't really complain about that one.
And Joel, you are our resident #sequelist. Start with TLG at 5, and then talk about both Rise of Skywalker and Force Awakens retrospective.
Yeah. It's funny. In my group of circles, who really loves The Last Jedi? A lot of non-Star Wars fans. A lot of people who look at the original trilogy and go, "That's stupid," or just don't like it. Or even the prequels too. Okay. Prequels, originals, both this is kind of stupid or dumb. They really like Last Jedi for some reason. They also kind of like Force Awakens too. But they really connected with Last Jedi. And to them, it's they've never been massive Star Wars fans, but to them, they really liked Last Jedi out of all the other movies. So to them, that sort of was their Star Wars. Rogue One is also kind of there a little bit too, but it's a little bit more of a 50-50. But Last Jedi especially was definitely that. So it's interesting that the most meta Star Wars film was also the most accessible for these people.
Yeah.
But no, everything you said is right. Star Wars Last Jedi is such a meta Star Wars movie about Star Wars. It is about Star Wars. Rey and Kylo, they're Star Wars fans, and they come at it from very different angles. Luke is the grumpy intellectual who thinks, this Star Wars is stupid. And kind of the George Lucas metaphor too, because in terms of Luke Skywalker's always been George Lucas's self-insert character, and now he's George Lucas and old and kind of a little grumpy. Star Wars fingers, but then he comes back. It just kind of challenging expectations and whatnot. But yeah, I love the movie. I put it in S tier for a reason in my ranking. I love the S through F tier ranking because I think it's a little bit more fair than doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I do think the meta did start with the Force Awakens as well. In terms of again, Rey and Finn and Kylo are all these are Star Wars fans who are now part of Star Wars The Journey. Rey, I grew up with the Legends, which is I grew up watching the OT. And Kylo's I like the Empire because they were badass and cool and stuff like that. So I think it's sort of the first two films really kind of have the meta thing, which I think maybe also is why the sequel do kind of have that strange rap, because um being your sequel trilogy being just a meta commentary on Star Wars is such a it's an interesting thing to do, and I wonder if that was sort of one of the through lines through all the original the sequel trilogy film, when they sat down. It's like, okay, we're gonna do like this meta text of Star Wars, like it's Star Wars talking about Star Wars, and I wonder if like maybe that's a little too much. Well, the other two weren't super meta. I mean, obviously the first one can't be meta because you're making it, and then the prequels was obviously about the fall of the Republic. So more of an in-universe thing. But yeah, and then Rise of Skywalker 3. A lot of people are loving that, as I see on Twitter. I'm sure, I think more people will love it over time. And once we kind of move past Episode 9 in general, I think sort of the heart and emotions will dissipate as we move on, both in kinds of both in like the sensible sense, but also the fact that like it's the next thing, so people can hate on that. So both in like the good sensible sense and the bad sense of just online discourse. But yeah, that the sequel trilogy keeps growing up, and I'm sure we'll start seeing changes in discourse over time, as we always do. It's like the meme. It's like a meme. It's like the meme of like Star Wars thing comes out, I hate you, and then a few years later, everyone's like, eh, and then at the end, it's like the sacred Jedi text. So
hey, that's the prequel trilogy right there. I mean, we keep coming back to that. Interesting, Joel. You mentioned that, and Din's mom, one film she loves too. It's interesting, the folks who don't hold their vision of Luke as so precious, I think it is, and their vision of what Star Wars is so preciously, so tightly. They don't crave after this one ring to rule them all. Are the ones that are less offended by that film. Then I guess there's those of us who like getting preached at. I don't know. Joel, speaking of liking stuff, tell us about your thoughts about liking stuff or not. And in light of the sequel trilogy too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I kind of have always disliked about Star Wars discourse, in general, and we can talk about whether or not you believe in objectivity, subjectivity, etc., is sort of this weird notion of like, I dislike something, therefore I think it's bad. I think it's bad, or vice versa. And I don't believe that's true at all. Like, a couple of weeks ago on the show, I did my as critically objective, as unbiased as I possibly humanly could, because everything's a little bit biased, ranking of Star Wars. And I put my beloved Return of the Jedi, the one I love the most, my number one, at a B tier. I put it at a B ranking. Because I thought of stuff like Han and Leia's characters kind of get a little shafted. The first act is kind of weird and doesn't connect to things. There's some cinematography things, and there's some tonal imbalance. And I put it at a B. But I love Return of the Jedi. It's my favorite Star Wars movie. I put Phantom Menace at a C, and I love Phantom Menace. I think that's honestly my favorite of the prequels. I go back and forth on Revenge of the Sith. I love both of them, but I put that as a C because I think, from whether or not I think it's good or bad, I thought, oh well, I like the concept, but I think there's some execution. I think there's some maybe a little distractions here and there. I think some story plots aren't as tight. I wish Padme was a little bit more focused as the main heroine, etc., etc. But I like Phantom Menace. I truly do, and I sometimes feel like, especially on Twitter, let's say on podcasts, but especially on Twitter and places like that, I feel like it's like, well, I like the Phantom Menace. I dislike this. Therefore, I think it's bad. And I like, well, I mean, I'm not a big Game of Thrones person. I've never really liked Game of Thrones, but I don't think Game of Thrones is bad. I think it's fine. I think it's probably really good. Or even like, I've said this many times, of the two Abrams Star Wars films, I like Rise of Skywalker way more than I like Force Awakens. That's the one I go back to more. But I do admit Force Awakens is the better put together movie in terms of just the plot and the editing and all that stuff. So I feel like people are losing the fact we can have these multiple thoughts in our heads. And I just feel like the nuance is being missed.
You're sort of saying like you can admire the the craft of something, even if it isn't necessarily to your taste. I was watching something with the author Brandon Sanderson recently, where he was talking about why he never writes reviews for books he doesn't like. And he says because sometimes it's just because it doesn't appeal to him personally, even if there's great craft involved. And the metaphor he used was he hates salmon. He doesn't want to eat salmon. If you serve him salmon, he will not like it. It doesn't matter.
Good.
You could make the best salmon in the world, and you could fry it up perfectly or grill it perfectly and put just the right seasoning on it and serve it just right and do everything perfectly. And you could sit down and admire that she did a great job with it. But as soon as it goes in his mouth and it touches his taste buds, doesn't like it. So you can I think, like the Game of Thrones is a good one where you can go, yeah, it's incredible how they made that show, how they put film stuff on location, use CGI, how they had filmed the battle in season 6 with all of these 20 horses charging at each other in a field in Northern Ireland. But also go, I don't really like stories where there's it's really gory and bloody and or just the politics of it aren't interesting to me. All that stuff. I think it's completely fair to to admire the craft and just say the end product, the end result isn't for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and we're gonna talk about one show in particular this year, which I feel like had a lot of that. Admire the craft, but maybe it just wasn't for your taste. I mean, I didn't feel that way, but I just I saw a lot of that, so I think it's gonna just sort of teeing up for the next big discussion. But yeah, that's sort of my thing on Discourse. I hope we can kind of have that kind of discussion with each other. I think it cheapens it. Like I liked it, I didn't like it. Okay, like that's not fun. That's not interesting.
Yeah, well, Dom, I'm glad you're here because I want to ask you a potentially somewhat personal question. You've studied film, in a like a post-secondary, like college, university level. How do you go between the film student and the film fan in this, including Star Wars and elsewhere? Like, what's that transition like for you?
I see. I'm weird. I know a lot of people talk about that sort of distinction of the film student and the film fan, or the critic and the fan. I don't make that distinction in myself.
Right.
There's just my opinion. There's just my enjoyment of stuff. And I will I can watch a movie and pick out things that are quote unquote wrong with it and still love it, and vice versa, watch a great movie and still come away from it going, I didn't care for that. And it all just sort of formulates how I feel about that movie. So I don't believe in making for myself at least, making a distinction between watching something objectively and watching it as a fan. It's either you like it or you don't. You enjoyed it or you don't. And again, you can break things down on sort of a technical merit, and you can break down what you did like and what you didn't like. But at the end of the day, your reaction to something is your reaction to something, and that's the most sort of powerful part of it. So, yeah, I'll watch the Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones, one of the Star Wars movies that people say is technically less proficient than some of the other ones, which is debatable, but that's that. And yeah, I can certainly see what someone is talking about, but that movie still resonates with me. And by that same token, we can watch a great classic movie from the golden age of Hollywood, and we can really admire the craft that went into it, and especially considering that people were breaking new ground with certain things back then. And she'll just go, they hadn't quite figured out pacing yet, and so the story doesn't quite land for me, or just the pacing. Audiences at that time had a different taste for pacing. So I really do. I agree with what Joel is saying, that you can have sort of those two. You can admire something technically and still feel emotionally a different way about it. So I don't really, I try to avoid it. Again, for myself, other people can do how they want. I don't engage with the whole objective versus fan brain, because I think that's nonsense, and I think it's people trying to justify their enjoyment of something, which you don't have to do. You
Yeah,
don't
right.
have to you can't say I know this is bad, but I like it anyways. Like, well, why are you saying you know it's bad, but you like it? Just
Yes.
say
No,
you like it. You
Yeah.
can just like it. You don't have to qualify. You don't have to justify it because
yeah.
it works for you on the most important level.
I remember
Right.
this incredibly clickbaity article one time. It was only from maybe 2-3 years ago, and all through was like, so the headline was, and it is one of those listicles or whatever. The prequel is not that bad, and it starts to say everything that was good about the prequels, but it always every single point was like, oh, but we know it wasn't that great, but here's this one thing we know it wasn't that great, trying to hedging it, and like in whatever year it was, 2019 or whatever year it was, people don't need to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
Joel, go for it with Dean's comment there.
Didn't I think make a good point? You either feel you like art or you don't. No attempt to intellectually change another's mind will ever change their heart. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think on this podcast, I've never tried once to, change Matthew's mind or Donald's mind and everything. Like I share my excitement of Rise of Skywalker, what I take out of it. And whether or not that changes anyone's hearts and minds, I'm not trying to. I'm just like, hey, this is what I like about the movie because this is how I see it. Or, and I do think, it's good to listen to criticisms where I think there are valid. Like I do agree with a lot of the criticisms of, say, like Padme's treatment in the prequels and how she was handled by the time you got to Revenge of the Sith, or even how I feel like she could have been more prominent in Phantom Menace because for a lot of real world issues going on here. But at the same time, I still love those movies and still think they are great. And it's just just fun to look at things from different angles, but still matter.
And this, just to go back to something way earlier, you are allowed to change your opinion. Our opinions change over the years, and something that didn't resonate with you at one point in your life may resonate with you at a later point. And you may listen to a discussion about something where somebody goes, what, they're talking about a movie you don't really care for. Somebody says, what, pay attention to this aspect of it. And then you watch it again and you focus in on that aspect of it, and that can change your mind. You can change how you view the movie, and all of a sudden, when you focus in on that aspect, you have a new appreciation for it, or it speaks to you in a way that you weren't expecting it to. So I think it's again, I think it's worth having these discussions, in part just because they're fun, but also sometimes it makes you think about something a little bit differently, and then you go back to it, and all of a sudden you get a whole new level of enjoyment out of something you previously thought wasn't all that interesting.
Yeah, I will say, Joel, your positivity about the Rise of Skywalker is contagious. I mean, the things you pick out, you're like, oh yeah, that was actually this cool lore moment, or everything to do with Palpatine was pretty much. I remember when I first saw that, my jaw dropped. So yeah, just focusing on those positive things. Yeah, it can be contagious. We'll see. One thing I hope is contagious. I don't know if I'm succeeding, but I hope it's contagious. Is my love for the High Republic, and going to move on to a bit of news here. Very briefly, very quickly. 2 bits of High Republic news-ish. Things that have come out. First of all, I know it's a bit of an alphabet soup there. HR Phase 1 YA. They announced the Star Wars show. So on the Star Wars show hosted by the great Kristen Baver, she announced a paperback box set of the Phase 1 young adult novels. It's a Phase 1 young adult paperback. Of course, Into the Dark, Out of the Shadows, and Midnight Horizon. And different things, and the big thing for me, frankly, is the covers. I'm gonna show you guys these covers. And I mean, if Dom's around, yeah, he's there. Okay, so first of all, here's the cover of the box set. Sure, that's great. I'm gonna go in reverse order just because you'll understand why in a second. Here's Zine on Midnight Horizon. Just take a moment to appreciate that. Then Vern here. Sorry for Nestra. Vern for Nestra. She's Vern. And Out of the Shadows. And then my guy, the one and only Reith Silas on Into the Dark. And I just love how they're kind of photoreal a little bit. They're staring right in your soul. You're like, we are young Jedi, or in Zine's case, not quite a Jedi, but still, we're young Force users. You will take us seriously. And Reith, his whole story about being taken seriously as an intellectual, as someone who seeks to be deep into history. while maintaining a strong grip on the needs of the present. And so honestly, I mean, I just want posters of these. But I might just buy them just for the
I mean,
covers.
you've already bought multiples of the adult novels in
It's
High
true.
Republic Phase 1, so you might as well go all in on the YAs.
And
too.
I spent way more on that than
Yeah.
on these sets. These sets go for about, this set goes
Yeah.
for about maybe 30 or 40 Canadian. So
yeah, these covers are great. I'm just so disappointed by the first one, the one that's like on the side. I'm like, that looks like, surely you
This
could have
one?
put
Oh, this one here, yeah.
yeah, that one. Surely you could have come up with
Yeah.
something better than that.
That's
Like the other
true.
ones are like beautiful portraits of these characters. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know, do one of the other characters. Or
Yeah.
you know, just throw Starlight Beacon on there or
True.
something. Like, just
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love
This looks like a placeholder.
Yeah, it's true. It does. It's not the placeholder.
All that's missing
There's
is the
also
stamp, the like sideways stamp on it that says placeholder.
placeholder. All right.
I love the continuation of photorealistic paintings of characters who don't have actors. Begin with Thrawn in 1991's
True.
Heir of the Empire.
Mhm.
So before he ever gets official live action actor, hopefully one day, very soon. Or you know, I got one right here. I got the
In the
Thrawn
new
book
year?
behind me. I got the Thrawn book behind me. They got like the photorealistic. He kind of looks like Mads Mikkelsen, kind of, but obviously it's not 100%. So they
Mhm.
did the thing.
I feel like that was a safe bet when they're like, "How should we make him look like?" I know, Mads Mikkelsen.
just
Why
in
not?
case.
Or
just
sorry,
in
not Mads,
case.
not Mads, Lars
Lars, yeah.
Mikkelsen.
Ours, right?
Yeah.
I meant
The other
might have
Mikkelsen.
There you go.
been-
So I'm just
They both
cycling
would-
through these.
Yeah.
Sorry, go, Joel.
They both would have made good Thrawn, but yeah, I love that tradition. It's always kind of cool.
Mhm.
I remember pre Ahsoka the series, some of the photorealistic Ahsoka pictures, not just on boxes, but like in the Essential Guide to Warfare, where they would they would Photoshop Hayden's head on like a Clone Wars body, and it looked really weird.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what they did for that the first Thrawn variant that I know Dom has
Yeah.
that he will never part with.
No.
With the
You'll
Thrawn
pry that-
Anakin.
You'll pry that out of my cold dead hands.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me feel like I already feel like I know these characters as people. You know how fiction works and
Mhm.
characters work on you. This even adds to it to me. So
Sure.
I'm a fan. Okay, let's sadly remove how do I do that? There we go. Second little bit of news-ish. StarWars.com had a phase 2 roundtable article. Lily Kang, Tessa Gratton, Zoraida Cordova, and George Mann sat down with a small little cameo from publishing head honcho Michael Siglain, and they chatted. It's a written article, but they clearly were chatting about the second round.
So basically, we got a printout, or not a printout, like a copy of their Slack channel.
Kinda, yeah. But I mean, yeah, it was a pretty good interview-ish thing. Yeah, and some really interesting comments. I think it stood out to me. I don't know if either of you had a chance to read it, but what stood out to me is when Tessa Gratton talking about the path of the open hand. That I'm still thinking about, and they're my favorite new thing.
I love the Mother. The Mother, I think. Here's my hot take. I think the Mother is a more interesting villain than Marchion Rowe because the Mother just like stood out to me right away.
Yeah, interesting. Speaking of the Mother, speaking of the path, I'll quote Tessa Gratton directly from this. So she's talking about how the path is a direct threat to the Jedi. First, most of them are true believers. That gives them a drive where they're willing to do anything to win. They'll throw their lives on the line if they're told to do that by their leader. Second thing is, I think Tessa Gratton thinks the path of the open hand's biggest strength actually mirrors the Jedi's biggest weakness, which is passion. That's something that the Jedi do not know how to deal with. That's the sharpest blade that the path of the open hand has. So not just the nameless, but the passion, that how they're open to passion, even though they have a very kind of stoic, non-interventionist belief about the Force, which again I go into on the track to be more. This stood out to me because I think more about the philosophy, and I do go into what motivates them, but still in an intellectual way, in a philosophical way. And I really appreciated how Tessa Gratton's comments spoke directly to the character motivations. And Joel, you mentioned how the Mother, they're willing to, the proverbial run through a brick wall for her. I think she's incredibly manipulative in the way they deal with tragedy and trauma, but it's still clear that they're there. I don't know if you guys got a chance to read this. What may have stood out to you? Otherwise, how far are you guys into phase 2, and what do you think about the Path of the Open Hand?
Did you read it? I did not. But
I have not read it. I am still running in place at the starting line.
Getting some exercise, getting your cardio on.
Yeah. Just I'm still stretching, getting ready to get in the race. Well, last year, I think at the beginning of last year, because that's right around when phase 1 ended. I did like a binge read of a whole bunch of the High Republic stuff. I finally read all the comics. I read the last batch of books in there, and all leading up to Fallen Star and Midnight Horizon. And that was really, really fun. And I've kind of accidentally set up myself to do that again this year.
Yeah.
That wasn't my plan. I've just I go through like binge reading just in general, where I'll go from like spending all of my downtime reading to not read for like a month, to then not reading at all for a month. And I'm kind of in the not reading at all phase right now. And I think, but I sort of most of the way through a book that I've been reading for a really long time. That's really interesting, but a really slow read. So once I finish that, I'm gonna need something a little bit more. I need something faster and more intense. And I feel like Path of Deceit and what's the first adult novel? Convergence. Yeah. Both of which I've got my copies of, so I'm ready to hit the ground running and jump back into the comics as well with those. And I will just say, can I just say about Convergence? We were talking about covers there.
Yeah,
that's my favorite of the High Republic.
I have that in
Convergence one, because that thing was just gorgeous. I don't know who that character is on the front. I don't know what's going on, but I found the covers for the adult novels of phase 1. They looked like Marvel movie posters. Is kind of how they looked. And this felt more like we were talking about Last Jedi. Like there would be the main poster for Last Jedi where they just throw everything on, but then there were those awesome character posters that were all red. This felt like it's like the character poster version, and I like that a lot better than the covers where you're just getting a bunch of characters and something crazy's happening in the background. This felt like, and just the colors were so distinct. So I'm looking forward to that book based on the cover alone. I'm very much judging the book by its cover right now, and I just hope it lives up to how good I think that art is. Yeah, I'm about I'd say 100 pages left to go in Convergence. That's by Zoraida Cordova. Convergence. It lives up to it. I will say it's good. It like I was saying last week, it gets that balance between telling a bigger historical story but still being more character focused and plot focused.
I admire that.
I love phase 1. Like I was gonna say, I'm already a huge fan of phase 2. So
is phase 2 vibing with you even more than phase 1?
Vibing with me even more than phase 1, which I thought it would, but especially this Path of the Open Hand.
I think phase 2 might be vibing with me more too, because I like the mother already. I think we could have just a better start. I think first of all, read Path of Deceit before you read Convergence.
Yes, I'm going in order.
And this is like my one tiny nitpick is that once again, I am not sure if how well they're handling the every book stands on its own thing, because I feel like I understand what's going on in Convergence with the Path of Deceit, Path of the Open Hand, more because
I felt like they abandoned the every book stands on its own with Fallen Star. Like that book.
They did.
Like the fact you have to get the full story of the fall of Starlight Beacon, you have to read like 3 novels and 7 comic books. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
my biggest kind of nitpick complaint with High Republic phase 1 is the official end of phase 1 is in a comic book and not a book. And that's not even to complain about comics and books in a hierarchy. Just I don't know. I just feel like people would not get that. Unless you're really into it.
Like me. Well, yeah. Well, and I think the best novel of phase 1 is the one that also stands best on its own in the sense that it's a sequel to Light of the Jedi, so you should have read that. But Rising Storm, you know, you get something extra if you've read everything else.
Yeah.
And if you continue to read everything else, but I still am in awe of what Cavan accomplished with that book.
Yeah. I
But,
mean, Joel, the proof in the pudding for your question is if the Battle of Jeddah makes sense on its own a little bit. Or if you've just read Path of Deceit. Yes, the audio drama.
Yeah.
They will put by George Mann. They will make the novelization of the script, novel version of the script. But yeah, if having just read Path of Deceit, maybe there's references to this treaty with Aram and Arano and all that stuff. If that's all you need, then we'll see. I mean, yeah, it's possible.
But to get to your question, I am. I think I'm on chapter 20 now of Convergence. I got a couple more chapters in. Like you said, I think. Well, because Path of Deceit was such a small scale story compared to Light of the Jedi, where it's like, here's a bajillion things, figure it out. It's like, my brain can't handle that. Overstimulation alert. But with Path of Deceit, like, okay, here's Marta Rowe, here's the mother, here's a very character driven young adult thing. I love the mother. She reminds me of characters from other shows. So like, and she's just really creepy, but I love it. I think I like that bit more than Convergence, although that's because I've been reading it slowly, so character names just disappear from my brain, but that's always been my problem. And I'm listening to it on audio book. I listen to them all.
I have that same problem, Joel, where I'll forget character names. So when I was reading Tarkin back in the day, you know how that book is structured, where like the first half is all Tarkin flashbacks, and then the second half is a completely separate story. And so like halfway through, you're introduced to like 6 new characters, and I could not keep them straight in my mind who they were, what their name was, what their job was, or what their species was. And at the time I had this whiteboard in my room and I got to the point where I restarted the back half of the book, and I went and wrote out who all the characters were, what species there were, and what their role was. And so when I read it from that point on, I'm like, oh, okay, now I can follow it better. I'm liking it. I'm like, and I enjoyed the process a lot more.
I need to do that because every single Ion Canon thing, what's Paul Bettany's character name? Like, I save it all for trivia. Anyway,
But, when you're rigging the questions for Ben.
So some of the characters I can't remember, and sort of like, who is this, and what's their deal again? Some characters I do remember. There's one character, I don't want to spoil it anything for Dominic. So there's one character who likes to play cards and drink a little bit, who I really remember because they're a bit more of a character that I remember. But no, I mean it's a cool book. Again, I'm not sure if they're keeping up to the whole every book stands on its own thing, because Path of Deceit is very much helps me understand better what's going on. Especially because the Pass of the Open Hand stuff. So maybe it's just one of those things that like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to just do what Dominic did one day and just get these all on Audible and just binge listen one day. To just go full Marvel.
Write out who all the characters are just on a sheet of paper and just look at them, or type them out in a Google Doc and have it there when you're ready. Or when you're listening.
I have a third screen. I have my StreamYard, like the streaming thing. I have my notes here. I need like a third. Right in front of me. just says Dryden Voss, nothing else. Nothing else. Fun times, Dryden Voss. There it is.
We'll just leave this comment up and
just leave it up.
Thank you, Doc.
There we go. Okay, one last little bit here. Thursday night, on the flagship, Dom and I and Chris, Ben, and Hannah all went into this. So Joel, I'll throw this to you. The Patty Jenkins statement on Rogue One and Wonder Woman, and I'll follow that up with a segue question. But
very interesting. Very interesting. I'll say that. It feels like there are a bajillion things in various forms of development, and I'm sure there are. Like, I feel like fans think Lucasfilm just is sitting on their butts all day doing nothing. It's like, now film time. No, I mean, it's like, I'm sure there are like a bajillion things, scripts getting written, probably art being made for something, and it's sort of like, well, whoever has kind of the most steady idea and steady process, or most steady script, eventually gets the the green light, and then you go for it. that's how I feel like most Hollywood movies kind of work in the big studio section. It's like, okay, you got some stuff going on, and whoever kind of has the best kind of most thought out pitch, or just the most hopefully the most thought out idea, go poof. Okay, you get the green light, and then that's when stuff happens. And whether or not it seems solid at the time, and then everything just falls apart. Well, that's movie making for you in general. Trust me, I'm sure no one goes in thinking they're gonna have a disaster on their hands. It just sometimes that's Hollywood for you, and sometimes it works out, and other times it doesn't. Otherwise, and if there was a formula to this, we'd all be rich. We'd all be making bajillions of dollars.
If I had $1 million.
That's true. So I sympathize a little bit. So these art is hard to make, people. As someone who makes it, someone who likes to write, just in general. So yeah, so it's interesting. But I'm glad Patty is still in the good graces of the Lucasfilm people. And whether or not her thing ever gets made, she herself says, I don't know, but it will. Things will happen when they happen. Because most people at the end of the day, they're just like, oh, new Star Wars film, cool. It's only us crazy people who look at this like a hawk. So so yeah.
In the immortal words of Hannah Rayside, I will believe it when it's 5 to midnight and I'm sitting in the theater with popcorn in hand. It won't be 5, it'll be like 5 to 6 p.m, 5 to 7, and I will not have popcorn. But the point remains.
Until the words "a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away" have faded out and something else has taken their place, whatever that not is. Something we've already seen, then I'll believe it.
Yeah. So this raises an interesting question, because I saw Avatar last night, and that film was finally made. Broke ground. Avatar: The Way of Water broke ground in terms of filmmaking, everything. In the trailers, there was trailer for Ant-Man Quantumania, the trailer for Guardians 3. We know there's also Marvel shows coming out. Other parts of the House of Mouse even are able to figure this out, especially Marvel. And you talk about, Joel, you talk about things working out, things not working out. The fact is, with Star Wars, since Rise of Skywalker was locked and loaded, probably halfway through 2019. So we're coming up to 2023. It's been 3.5 years. Things haven't worked out. Let's just say that. I'm going to say that full stop. It is an either or in terms of TV shows, Disney Plus shows, and films. And I get that people lament that. Dami mentioned the film going experience, the open night experience. It is special. I've come to realize that it is something that we all come to remember, that it's something we all crave and all long for. The event. So it was like you mentioned on Thursday with the Obi-Wan Kenobi event. Why do you guys think it just hasn't for films, but has for the Disney Plus shows? Is it the different stakes? Do the stakes mean storytellers prefer the safety of a longer format? I'm wondering, and I'm just giving
my I have a few theories about this.
Let me just get through, and then I'll let you guys open up. The safety of a longer format. Again, I'll just give my thoughts, and then I'll throw it to you. You guys can bounce off. To answer more detailed questions, given everything, maybe with The Last Jedi and everything that came out of that, people need to take the time. Rather than take the risk of a shorter film, is there something businessy behind the scenes? Does it have to do with high profile directors not wanting to get their hands dirty? I don't know what it is. I've thrown a bunch of ideas out there. Joel, you're eager to jump in. What do you think it is?
So I think it's a few things. I think generally after Rise of Skywalker, they were going to take a break no matter what. 2, I think because of what Disney's overall strategy was, they were given the assignment from up high of focus on Disney Plus shows, make Disney Plus shows. That is our top priority, especially when Chapek was in charge. 3, I generally do think that the Patty Jenkins thing is kind of an odd fluke of they hired a director who had a lot of projects at hand, and as she said herself, she had commitments to make Wonder Woman, and it was either, and Rogue One was, slowly developing. So it's like, okay, well, I got more stuff to do with Wonder Woman. I don't want to push that back, so I got to do that now.
It's Rogue Squadron. I mean, just
Rogue
be
Squadron.
clear.
I'm sorry. I'm going to keep
be
saying
clear.
that.
That's gonna happen a lot.
You've both said Rogue One at different points.
Did I? Oh,
I know. I'm sure I've said it.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, who knows what 2025 looks like, but I think if Lucasfilm wanted to put out a movie, they could do it. Whether or not it's good or not, I don't know. But I think if they wanted to, if Disney forces them to put out a movie, or Lucasfilm's like 2025 movie, come heck or high water, we'll do it. We'll hire just a director who just off the street, dude. We'll pay for cheap, shoot the thing, work our crew to the ground because we're not unionized. It's probably cheap and terrible, but we'll do it. I know. Yeah. I went there. I went there. So
I mean, the reports about what's going on Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
That's
TV. And that's
Yeah.
TVs. That's the TV side of things. So, I think it's a bajillion just things at once. I think it's just they decided to take a break, and also COVID happened. So their 2023 slot didn't work out because of Patty Jenkins' thing. And since nothing has been announced for 2025 in terms of filling a slot, which again, slots don't mean anything really. Although we do have a celebration coming out next year, this year in a couple of months. So who knows what? I'm curious what they'll announce in general.
Begin the celebration rumors again. They will announce everything at celebration rumors.
Oh, no.
That fuels me. That will
Well, I'm
fuel me
excited.
all the way to London, England, to find out what are they going to announce, only to get some trailers for things we already knew about.
That's true, and also something you brought up, Dominic. They're running out of shows. All the new shows are almost done. Ahsoka and Mando season 3 are happening this year. Who knows if Skeleton Crew is happening this year or next year? I think they originally wanted for this year. And then 2024 is going to be, my guess, Acolyte and Andor season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And unless they're announcing new shows, and Mando season 4 is coming soon. So, and I don't know if the other shows are multiple seasons or not. So they're just running out of stuff in general. Eventually, it's like dry spell completely. So I feel like an era of Star Wars is slowly coming to an end. And whatever that next era is going to take its place soon-ish.
I just wonder, just the question, jumping there, why, what does Marvel have that Star Wars doesn't then? Because Marvel is able to keep the thing going and do both at the same time, and maybe do they just have more people?
That's because it's just a different mentality. I think Star Wars has a mentality of director Taika Waititi, come to us, give us a pitch. Come on, give us a pitch. Patty Jenkins, what's your idea? Got any ideas? Dave Filoni, got ideas? Marvel, from what I hear, they're very much Kevin Feige's like, okay, we're gonna do Fantastic Four, we're gonna do Iron Man, we're gonna do Silver Surfer, and we're gonna you write it, and like it's very top down kind of like we're doing this. And I think
he's a robot that just comes in and has this fake thing, and then
and I think
Kathleen
Kathleen Kennedy
from Regina comes in, and
and Kathleen Kennedy is a little old school. I think she's more like, okay, directors and creatives, give us a pitch. What do you got an idea? Maybe every now and then they'll have like, okay, we'll do this. We'll do the solo film. Kathleen, you want to do it? But I think for the most part, I think they got more of that. Hey, Taika, got any ideas for us? Bring them in. Let's see if we can't make some magic happen. Because Kathleen Kennedy is an old school director, is a producer. She is from the old school, old guard, literally. Not a bad thing. I actually kind of admire that more auteur kind of vibe for it. And I think Marvel is a bit more. Kevin Feige is sort of, here's the movies we're gonna make. Here's you people, you make it for us. John Watts, make Spider-Man, go. So I think that's sort of like, that's how they get the machine running. There's actually a good book about how the Marvel machine works. That's really interesting. I will send that to you after the show if I can find it.
Dom, go for it.
I think as Joel said, there's a whole bunch of factors that play into this. But I think the biggest thing, if you want to look at the specifics difference between Star Wars and Marvel, is that Marvel does not have the same mainstream legacy that Star Wars does. Obviously, it has an incredible legacy in the comics and on television and all of this stuff. And there are people who have followed Marvel comics for years and years and years and years, decades and decades. And there are characters that are known by everybody, even before the MCU, whether it's Spider-Man or the X-Men or Fantastic Four, people had a general idea that these are characters that existed. But it was until sort of 2008 to 2019, somewhere in there, it was not the biggest thing in the world. When Star Wars came out, it was the biggest thing in the world, and it stayed that way until Return of the Jedi came out, and then it became that again in the early aughts, the late 90s, early aughts, with the prequels. And all through that, these films, this sort of legacy has been passed down, so everybody has seen Star Wars movies, and you might see them slightly more frequently than most people read a Marvel comic. You'll catch, back in the day, you'd catch them on TV, or you'd have the VHS and you'd dust them off once a year, in a way that you weren't necessarily grabbing your old Spider-Man comics. And so Star Wars has this legacy that is a great thing for Disney, in the sense that everybody knows it and everybody's aware of it. The brand recognition is unreal, but with that comes expectations. And Marvel can make a Guardians of the Galaxy movie,
right?
And that means nothing to the vast majority of people who are going to go see it. And it's a testament to the Marvel brand that all you have to do is slap the words Marvel Studios on it, and people go and see it. Put out a sweet trailer with Ooga Chaka Ooga Chaka.
It's true.
You do that and people go see it, but most people don't have a strong feeling on what the Guardians of the Galaxy should be, at least not with that first film. Yeah. And then what their opinions on what Guardians should be is then informed by that first film. So when you go into the second films, and so if you have that consistency of the same filmmaker making it, then you can hopefully carry that legacy forward. Star Wars is a lot of things to a lot of different people, and you make a movie that isn't just the sort of, hey, isn't it great that we got the Millennium Falcon and Harrison Ford back movie, and all of a sudden it can be a little bit more challenging. And love Marvel Studios for everything that they've done, and they've made some incredible movies, and they've entertained audiences in an incredible way. But nothing they have made has challenged their audience the way The Last Jedi did. And as we were talking about earlier, Last Jedi is a divisive film because it is so challenging, and people still have strong feelings about it. If someone didn't like Ant-Man, if you made that post, Matthew, saying, it's 5 years since Ant-Man came out, love Ant-Man, who doesn't love Paul Rudd? Are people going to be fighting in the comments about it?
No.
Right?
I'm sure some people
right?
will.
I'm sure there are some people out there who would, but most people are not going to go to that extreme.
Yeah.
And so I think Last Jedi, as much as it was a reckoning for fans, is like, it's bringing to the surface some of those the less savory elements. It also was a little bit of a reckoning, I think, for the filmmakers of, we have to, we don't our audience is not as, it's not the same as the Marvel audience. This audience, some of them really like being challenged, others don't. And so they have to sort of grapple with what that actually means. And what does that actually do? I think they bet wrong, because I think you go with the audience that likes to be challenged, because they will carry it forward. Yeah. They're more likely to stick around, I think. But they went backwards, and instead you pissed off a good chunk of them by doing something that wasn't, as, in my book, as interesting as Last Jedi with Rise of Skywalker. And in between that, you had what should have been the safest Star Wars movie ever in Solo come out, and it was a box office failure. And so I think there was a feeling of, let's go back to the drawing board and try and figure this out. And so, Joel, I think you're definitely right that there was always a plan to take a break after Rise of Skywalker, but I think that plan came at some point in late 2017, early 2018, when they realized, oh, we don't have a handle on these guys at all. We don't know what to do, what audience to reach out to.
I disagree a little bit.
I know. Let me finish here. Let me finish that. So
Alright, yeah, go ahead.
they go with that, and on top of that, they had some real bad luck. Obviously, COVID happens. Patty
Mhm.
Jenkins has a million projects. Patty Jenkins can't deliver Rogue Squadron on time. Benioff and Weiss signed this massive Netflix deal and decide they'd rather do that
Yeah,
instead
that
of a
happened
Star Wars
too, right?
movie. And whatever the plan may have been with Ryan Johnson's trilogy, he then said, if they said to him, you know what, let's put that on pause, he said, okay, I'm going to go also get a great Netflix deal with the Knives Out movies.
Mhm.
So all of that stuff winds up being put on pause, and they can't really get things going. And at the same time, I think they're also asked by Disney to put their focus a little bit more on the streaming side of things, because Star Wars launched Disney Plus. So and then that still speaks to the power that the Star Wars name has and the Star Wars brand has, that it was able to launch Disney Plus and carry the platform really until WandaVision came out.
Yeah.
So I think there was a little bit of that, and also they said we want to do an Indiana Jones movie in there, so let's put our cinematic efforts there, make that
Well,
while we still can,
Right. Yeah.
and let's do it. Let's get it out.
Mhm.
Our cinematic focus will be indie. Our Star Wars focus will be streaming, and all the while, let's try and wrap our heads around, what kind of Star Wars movies do we want to make? Can we do The Force Awakens even? Can we do that broad reaching Star Wars movie, or do we have to try and be a little bit more niche and be a little bit more specific? And this is somewhere where they can learn from Marvel, is Marvel does that. Let's say, let's do something a little bit more niche. Let's do something a little bit more specific. Let's do something a little bit more out there, not to the same degree that Last Jedi did, but in ways that have by and large paid off for them. Again, Guardians of the Galaxy was a wild bet to make,
Eternals.
and they delivered beautifully on that first film, certainly, and the legacy of that, we still see it in the MCU. So I think there's it's such a complicated thing, but at the end of the day, I think the Marvel films didn't have the same legacy as Star Wars to grapple with, and as such, there's a little bit more freedom of movement there.
Joel, I just want to try. I'll set you up in a second. It's kind of what you and Doc and them have said about committing to genre, and committing to specific genres, while still being Star Wars. I have the genre I like about the Space Wizards, and I like the Senators. Other people have other genres they like. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, sorry, Joel, go ahead.
But I want to make a few points. I think Dominic brings a lot of good points. Something about the Star Wars slate of movies, the Force Awakens to Rise of Skywalker, though, which I really appreciate, and you can tell also that this is why Star Wars is so different from Marvel. I do think Marvel films are a little formulaic. It's like, here's a character, here's a little origin arc. The thing I appreciate about Star Wars, especially the first slate of Star Wars movies, I don't feel any of them have ever felt the same. I felt like every Star Wars film never felt the same. So it's like Force Awakens is the intentional nostalgia trip to get us back in. Rogue One, the military film. Last Jedi, the meta commentary. Solo, the Western. Rise of Skywalker. It's a bunch of stuff at once.
Throw everything at the wall and hope something works.
Exactly. I think it's trying to be like a fantasy epic, and just didn't work. But that's the genre I see from it. You talked about the pivot. I generally think the pivot happened, but I think the pivot was to Disney Plus. I think you have to. Okay, I what you're talking about. Okay, I wasn't quite sure, but because I have to imagine. Okay, they knew they were doing the Mandoverse around 2018, around the time of Rise of Skywalker. I kind of have the sense that maybe they kind of knew. Okay, Rise of Skywalker is probably not going to be our best hit because of a bunch of things. Rise of Skywalker just production is like complete, just a bunch of stuff. So I feel like okay, we got to get.
Yeah, just to throw in something, there's some production timeline stuff that I'm thinking about where, you go to, you go back to sort of 2017, right before Last Jedi was coming out, as when they announced that Rebels is ending. I think that's when they're starting to work on The Mandalorian, and I think you get that, and I think so. I think they know that at some point they're going to have to that they're going to start making stuff for TV. I don't think the decision to focus all of their efforts on TV came until after Solo, or when they started to get a sense that Solo was going to be what it was. I think at that time they were expecting to just basically by now be doing exactly what Marvel is doing, to have multiple films a year and multiple shows a year. But instead they've gone with multiple shows, and we'll get to a movie when we get to it. Everybody calm down.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they kind of knew that, and that's why like the pivot was to like, okay, this Rise of Skywalker thing isn't working. Pivot to Mando, and then that was a big success. And in terms of the bad luck thing, it's. I think that one of the reasons is also the reason why I both admire Lucasfilm, but I also think they keep having this problem. They keep hiring writer directors. Taika Waititi is the writer director. Brian Johnson, the writer director. Patty Jenkins, the writer director. And you don't. And you know, if you look at something like Rogue One. This is Rogue One, not Rogue Squadron. Rogue One. Gareth Edwards was the director or co-director, but they got other people to write the film first. You know, John Knoll said, "Hey, let's do this," and they hired a bunch of guys.
But the guy who saved it was the writer director.
That's true, but
he actually finished it and then did a series. So
and you know, there's rumors about this Lindelof thing. And I'm kind of looking at that one because Lindelof's writing it, but he's not directing it. So if the director decides, I don't want this, they get another director. Now, if Lindelof leaves, maybe they're more in trouble. But if Lindelof's just writing it and he's doing a good job, they just bring in the director will do the thing. And it's kind of like a little like that Empire Strikes Back thing where it's like Lucas wrote the first draft and then they brought in Captain, but Kirshner's the director. So it's like more hands on deck kind of a situation. And you know, because I think being a writer director on your own is hard, and very few people, unless you're Rian Johnson, can do it with sort of like you know, satisfaction. You know, like, and maybe that's another reason why, you know, like the only time that's ever worked really was the sequel trilogy, but they were going to make episode 9 no matter who, so it didn't matter who was going to direct it. There was an episode 9 happening come heck or high water.
Come Malachor and high water.
Exactly. So I think that's where the bad luck is. So I'm just kind of, that's sort of my extra analysis on Dominic's analysis.
Well, the parallel there with the shows then, or the contrast with the shows, is you have Favreau and Filoni writing these things, planning these out, all these other directors coming in. Yes, Favreau and Filoni are directing episodes, but they're not alone. And I think, Dom, what I hear you saying then is they did learn the lesson from Solo. They are taking the time to get it right, which gives me hope. I will say that. That okay, hopefully they get a handle on it and get the lesson of let's dig deep into what the fans were going to go with them, the fans outside of the Star Wars community, whatever you want to call it, who are going to actually go pay money to watch these things. Yeah, okay, all right, I'm more hopeful now. There we go.
I mean, to throw a little shape, I think you guys would appreciate it. You know, they would have learned the wrong lesson if J.J. Abrams comes back for another Star Wars saga.
Sure.
Like, okay,
and the fact that Rian Johnson's
like
still in the conversation somewhere.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of they have to figure out what's gonna tap into what audiences are looking for.
Yeah.
And I think Force Awakens did that, and I think Rogue One did that, and Last Jedi did that for a lot of people, but it also didn't do it for a lot of people. And Solo certainly did it for some people, but not as many people as most Star Wars movies. And then Rise of Skywalker, again, you can see there's a split somewhere in there where it worked for some people and didn't for others. But I think, you know, the success of The Mandalorian, I think, has shown that the formula exists, that it can work. But then, you know, has there been a Star Wars show that has been as successful globally as the Mandalorian? I don't know.
Right. So on that note, things that even if they weren't as successful, they did by and large, I'd say, work, and they finished. They succeeded in that much. Joel, I'll turn this over to you. Talk to us about Eyes on Screen generally, and then let's dive into our Andor look back.
Yes, 3 Star Wars shows. 3 whole Star Wars shows. Quite a year. So, you know, it's 2022. I keep mixing up 2022 and 2023. 2022 is definitely a year of Star Wars, and 2023 will also be another year of Star Wars for sure. Quite interesting, quite very varying of both quality and genre of Star Wars. And I'll give you a little hint, but for me, it was sort of like it went from good, from to good to great. But overall, really interesting year, and of course, Andor being the most interesting. Oh, can you guys say something? My headphones are acting weird.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought my
You were
headphones were acting weird.
The video was kind of choppy. We're here, do fine.
Yeah.
Sorry. But let's start with Andor. So let's work backwards. Although in our notes, I think we kind of go weirdly
Nope,
out of
this
order.
is the direction. This is where we're going.
Okay. So Andor, yes. Speaking of it, it's sort of again those early points of like it versus good, popularity versus genre, all that interesting thing, because Andor was probably, like Last Jedi, one of the most unique Star Wars stories ever put to a screen. Not the screen, but a screen. The Disney Plus screen. It's one of those shows which I think is, well, like Mando in some way, but even more so that I know my friends who don't like Star Wars would totally like I feel comfortable showing them this when I know that if they would ever to watch actual Star Wars, they'd go, "Oh, this is stupid." This is what they would like. I have some judgy friends sometimes. I love you guys.
So do we all.
I mean, yeah, but but it does things that I've always looked forward to in Star Wars. It took a lot of what it's both very Lucasy in its themes, but it takes everything that was always sort of in the background, in the subtext, maybe too much in the subtext, makes it the text. It's the best genre. It's made by a non-Star Wars fan, yet it's probably the most important Star Wars story ever told.
There's a claim. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, maybe not the most important story ever told, but it's definitely deep in the. If here's the Skywalker saga, Andor is like kind of close to the gravity of that in more ways than I think even Mando is. That even has Luke Skywalker in it. And I hope as an experiment that Lucasfilm tries something like this again and hires a writer of Tony Gilroy's caliber to do a Star Wars. Not to knock down the Favreau, Filoni, or Joby Harold. They're all great too, but they do a different type of Star Wars, and Tony Gilroy is doing a very different type of flavor of Star Wars. And it's a very interesting caliber for sure. But Dominic, we'll throw it over to you. Just your Andor look back, a couple months weeks after it was over, and just in terms of the year of Star Wars on screen.
Yeah, I mean, Andor, I agree with just about everything you said, Joel. Like, I think this show, I almost call it a movie, feels like that sometimes. It delivered on something that I think has been missing, which is it wasn't trying to be a Star Wars show. It was a show set in Star Wars that benefited from being part of that larger galaxy. But like you said, it wasn't written by somebody who was trying to write a Star Wars. It was written to be its own thing, and it delivered on that. And I found it's so engaging week after week in a way that I wasn't expecting to get this from Star Wars. And I think this, the reaction to this show, there are some people that absolutely love it, like myself. I think it's brilliant. And then there's folks that it didn't really work for. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with, some things just don't work for people. What I've noticed with this show, and I think it speaks to that sort of legacy conversation and what, why did Last Jedi not land for some people, or why does it get such visceral reactions? Well, it's because it's playing with such famous legendary characters. And while Cassian Andor certainly had a fan base, he doesn't have the same fan base as Luke Skywalker going into this. So if the show doesn't work for you and you're a Star Wars fan, you can just kind of go, whatever, and throw your hands up in the air and say, I'll be ready for Mandalorian when that comes out. It doesn't reach into your heart and squeeze it in a bad way.
Shake things.
So, maybe that's a lesson for Lucasfilm, that you can do a story that is impactful and meaningful in the Star Wars galaxy, but doesn't have to involve the Skywalker characters or just famous characters like Han Solo as well. So, but anyways, just to get back to the show, it was 4 arcs essentially, and each one managed to tell a complete story, tell a powerful story. The prison break arc and the Aldhani arc, those two, man, that the climaxes, the finales of those were so impactful and meaningful, and they felt earned, they felt true, they felt impactful and joyous, but still tragic because of the era. I thought Andor was just brilliant, and I absolutely adored it. I thought the finale was a little bit odd because so many of the main characters were passive in it, but it was still emotionally impactful in such a brilliant way that it was while watching it, I wasn't thinking about, hey, why are these characters not doing anything? It was only afterwards that I was like, hey, everybody went to Ferrix and nobody did anything. They all just kind of watched it happen. But we also watched it happen, and it was incredibly impactful on us. So hopefully all those characters who watched it, it was also very impactful on them.
I kind of like the passiveness of it, though, because I feel like that's, again, and maybe, I mean, you can criticize it as bad writing or not, but I think that's also to an extent of, it's not Star Wars. Like, we're so used to, like, the main character, like, we gotta do stuff. We gotta, like, Luke Skywalker gotta destroy the Death Star or fight the Emperor, and here, Andor is not a remarkable person. I mean, he's a remarkable person, but not hero, journey kind of stuff. He is just, here are these spies for these organizations, and they kind of just have to watch the seeds that they sowed, which real life revolutionaries do too. Like, they just sometimes, like, there's a protest going on or a full on riot, and like got spies and counter spies doing stuff, but for the most part, they just kind of have to look and watch. Matthew, you were on Doc Holocron's channel. You were there for our finale for 3 hours. We talked a lot, but I know it was so much fun. Any thoughts on Andor looking back to this year?
Yeah, overall, I mean, I'll be curious to hear what the impact of it is in terms of like the political reaction to it, if you will. I was expecting it to be more on the nose, like Last Jedi was, and it turns out it wasn't. I'll bring up a little more theology time. In my preaching class, I was told, if you're going to challenge people to and challenge yourself among them to change something aspect of their lives, or to consider where they've gone wrong in some way, you tell it slant. You tell it in a way that invites them in, and the best way a Star Wars show can do that, or any kind of television show can do that, is through story. I mean, that's the classic show not tell dynamic of it. That is a bit of a gamble. Does it actually evoke people's emotional responses to what may be the Empire, we being the Empire? You think about that passivity of it, of that last episode, which I frankly didn't even think of. I was like, okay, where are you guys going with this? Oh yeah, okay, now I see what you mean, because the main characters in that last episode are the citizens of Ferrix, and you think about Avatar, and especially the first Avatar, but even little, not so much the second one, but definitely the first one, the criticism of the white savior complex coming in. Andor, he does grow up there. The rebellion, they have ties there, but it really is the people who stand up for themselves, and that's a challenging point. I hope people actually connect with that and see that as that's the seed of rebellion, that's the seed of change, social change in society. I don't know if that's gonna go over people's heads or past people's hearts or not. I don't think that's a failure on the part of the show. It's a thing I was looking for going forward, and again, I'm not even sure I dislike it. It's not what happened. Again, I want it to be preached at. And I wasn't, and that's fine. I was taken along for a ride, and instead, and maybe that, if anything, that is the challenge that I had to respond to, is I'm being taken on for a ride, the way Andor is taken on for a ride. I mean, he does get active. The raid on Aldhani is maybe his most active moment, and then of course the prison break also. But he's carried along, and maybe that's part of what this first season is about, in terms of his development, to the point where he becomes the rebel spy. In season 2, he might be have a more prominent voice in the rebellion. I mean, I'll say I loved it. It did have some work to do for me, because it's not Space Wizards. Um, the heaviest load, it is Senators, and so the heaviest load for me was taken up by Mon Mothma. And I mean, I want more of her. I want more of her in every era. What I was satisfied with what they did with her, especially since it's called Andor. It's not called Andor Mon Mothma. So yeah, I'm satisfied with the extent we got of her, but I do want more. In terms of the just the compromises, the moral compromise she has to make with that thug on Chandrila, the compromises she has to make or not make in the Senate.
He's
Everything
not
was
a
leading
thug.
to
He's a
that moment.
banker.
Yeah, that fine. He's a banker, sure.
He's worse.
Everything. The moment leading to the moment where she drops all compromises and drops all pretense. We see in Rebels, and Falon publicly joins the rebellion. That's in my mind through this whole thing, and of course it's supposed to be. I think in that last shot, the very end of the season, whether you know it's coming or not, whether you know what this leads to, if you thought that was too much on the nose, I don't know. I thought it worked fine in that it reminded us just what this is all leading to. And so, yeah, it's definitely a special show. I will say that.
Very much.
I don't know where to rank it. I don't know what to do with it, because it kind of defies those rankings. But just it's like Joel, you're saying, it's a different kind of Star Wars story. It's a different kind of show, period, because it also is a Star Wars story. It does take in the mythos, but does something different with it. Kind of what I was talking about a few weeks ago a few months ago with Luthen's shop, how all the mythos of Star Wars is a bit of a cover, but you can't really escape it. We can't really. Still got to have the shop. So.
Yeah.
No, I said it was the most important Star Wars story. What I'm trying to say during my ramble is I found it fascinating that a non-Star Wars fan like Tony Gilroy, and I don't think he hates Star Wars. He doesn't go on Star Wars is stupid.
Yeah.
He just that wasn't his thing growing up. He really stuck to canon in, I think, probably the best out of all these shows. Like, I felt like you're not like making references. He did make references to planets, but I just felt like when I was watching it, other shows in the era were now elevated because of it. Like there was a tweet that no longer exists of why is there a Star Destroyer coming over Lothal at the start of Rebels, and why does Agent Callus have stormtroopers and all this resources now? It seems like a bit overkill. And at the time, I'm sure it was just because, hey, it's Rebels, we want our Star Wars and we want our New Hope references. But Andor, maybe not by design, but certainly by something, made it where it's like, okay, the Aldhani heist happened, and now the ISB gets to really crack down. So it's like Lothal, which was like, oh, who cares about Lothal? Like, no, now we have to stand the Star Destroyer and all these stormtroopers and just start arresting people en masse because they weren't clapping hard enough. So, it's like it actually adds to the kind of the grand meta story of the Dark Times era. But in terms of legacy, and I'll throw this to you, Dominic, what do you think the legacy is in terms of like what do the people of Lucasfilm learn? What do they ever go with a writer like Tony Gilroy, again, of his caliber? I mean, I guess Acolyte is sort of my hopefully next bet. And what do the current showrunners like? Does Jon Favreau look at this show and go, "Ooh, I gotta step up my game," or does Jon Favreau go, "I'm Jon Favreau. I make the Lion King money, so I don't have to do anything. I start the MCU. I'm the Mando King. I do what I want." What do you think is the legacy on that front as well?
And just for Favreau, I think Favreau should just keep doing what he's doing. I don't think he should be him and Filoni. I don't think they should be necessarily worried about what else people are doing at Lucasfilm in the same way that I don't think Leslie Headland or the guys who are making Skeleton Crew or anybody else making different shows. I don't think there needs to be an internal competition amongst them. I think they can all make their own things and they can coexist and be successful together. But I do hope that this shows that there is an audience and there is an interest in Star Wars shows that don't stick to the same mold as The Mandalorian or the Skywalker saga. And I hope that that's what, if this show has a sort of a production legacy, I hope it's that, because I think the best vision of the future for Star Wars is one where all the different shows do their own thing so that there is truly something for everybody. All different shows and movies. I'll be optimistic. They do their own thing so that everybody can come away from them and go, yeah, okay, I maybe Andor wasn't my thing, but I love Acolyte and I love The Mandalorian, so I'm gonna focus my energy there. And when Andor's on, well, maybe I'll check it out, or maybe I'll just skip it. Or people go, I love Andor, but Mando's not my thing. Vice versa. I hope that everybody can find their thing in Star Wars, and it takes the pressure off of these other things so that they don't have to be everything for everybody. They can be their own thing, and hopefully that allows people to take a larger view of what Star Wars can be, and not feel that every project has to hit every single beat, or else it's not
Expanded
Star
universe,
Wars.
you might say.
Yeah, an expanded universe, absolutely.
But no, and you bring
Yeah.
up a great point, and it's the one thing during the entire Andor era, which honestly that was the only thing that bothered me, was the discourse of like people really taking down the other shows and the other things. Like, well, like even going down to A New Hope, it's like I saw some people were like, it's hard to take Andor seriously because a little a blondie kid just blows up the thing, and that's what this all is leading to. So it's like, it's like, well, that's because it's like Mando isn't season 1 wasn't bad writing. It's just different writing. It's like a different style of writing compared to Andor. But yeah, I do hope buddy Star Raptor Chris Abbott, he talked about how hopefully next Star Wars can have more prestige TV, and I do think Andor is them trying to do prestigious things. Like, this is not going to win the popularity contest, but it could win them some Emmys. Because I noticed a lot of the people who like the official critics and the Emmy Award people, like they were looking at Andor going, "Wow, look at this! This is fascinating, and this is Star Wars, really." But I do want them to try and go for like, let's do a prestigious TV show. Let's do the golden age of television, like the Breaking Bads and the Better Call Sauls. Doesn't always have to be super dark, but I definitely think they should try. So yeah, I do hope that is the legacy of opening up Star Wars beyond just your Mando formula.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna jump in there. First of all, it made flutes, trombones, French horns, and tubas canon. No. You mentioned Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and prestige TV. You mentioned them being darker. I mean, this is Star Wars going more adult. I mean, like Last Jedi did a little bit, other films did a little bit, but this one was really this grown-up TV. Don't show your kids this show yet. Maybe it might go over the heads. I don't know. It depends on how old they are, but it's definitely a more complex story. It's definitely a darker story. You have Luthen's whole monologue about sacrificing their soul, and sacrificing his soul, and how and I saw a video with great channel Alex Damon, of course, talking about how Luthen is problematic and problematizing someone you're supposed to cheer for, but then not quite. And it really pushed Star Wars in this direction, said they can do this and it can succeed. It doesn't have to be. And the George Lucas films, at their best, they are adult films disguised as kids films. This can be an adult show that's just an adult show, and it's good and it's fine. What I hope they don't do is just then presume that everything has to be this either. And so I mean, even with the Acolyte, with Elsie Headland, I hope they don't lose the fun of it. There was some fun in this show, but that's not the main thing. I do hope, with the Acolyte, it is dark, it is about Sith, it is this thriller, but because there are space wizards, there's still got to be some fun in there too. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. Here's my hot take for Andor. A lot of people saying this is the show George Lucas would have made. I gotta be honest, I don't agree. I think George always, even at his best, I think he always kind of held that Star Wars is a fairy tale for 12-year-olds.
I think,
even
I think this is the show. This is the show. Sorry, Joel. I think this is the show that George always said he would make, but never would. Like, this is the kind of thing he would always claim he was working on.
1313.
Yeah. But in the end, he would revert it back. He would always kind of he'd go back to his roots.
Yeah, exactly. And like Revenge of the Sith is probably the darkest Star Wars film he ever made, but even then it's still funny. There's like the first 10 minutes is hilarious with Baldroid just getting sliced and Grievous being it's like, Andor's like, no, there's none of that. Like, when someone gets tortured, they get mentally wrecked. It's like the prison scene is just claustrophobia and just
also like, mental torture.
Exactly. And it's like there is no like B2 Emo is adorable, but he's not a funny droid. He's a cute droid. And I want to hug him.
He's a sad droid.
Exactly. But
he's the sad blind dog,
The one bit of sort of like humor and fun is those trolls in like episode 10 or 11, and you're like you're like 10, 11 episodes into it, and all of a sudden you get this this scene that wouldn't necessarily feel out of place in Star Wars episode 7.5 or something, but in Andor you're like, what is going on with these droids, these sort of alien troll characters?
And turns out nothing really.
Nothing really. They just go around going moisey moi, poison in the water. I love that. I love those guys. Like, I love that scene, but it
was a nice refresher too after just that prison scene.
But the point being, we only get it for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
and then they're gone.
And it's 2 minutes out of like 12 episodes.
Exactly. Yeah.
But also, I think this gets to the point of what Dominic's talking about. We don't have to make Star Wars for 12-year-olds. I think Star Wars doesn't have to be for everyone in the the tonal sense. Like obviously diversity and but you can make a Star Wars for the adults. And this is sort of like what I feel like people who say, "Oh, I want my rated R Star Wars." I think Andor is like the best you're gonna get, and I think that's kind of what their mentality is, because I think it is for the people who grew up with A New Hope in '77 and now, like, okay, they're 40, they're in their 40s now. They're kind of watching probably more adult stuff, so now they can kind of take their fun universe, but really have kind of the challenge.
I mean, they're more like their 60s.
Probably. So like the older audience, like they can now, like, this is the adult Star Wars, and it is the adult Star Wars, but also make sure you make the kiddie Star Wars and the every people Star Wars, and then the Star Wars in betweens for teens. But Andor, I loved it.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next one? Unless anyone got any last minute words for Andor?
Well, here's the thing about Andor. We had some theories. By way of moving on, we had some theories. We have a segment. We've done it maybe once or twice. Cold takes with Dominic.
Cold take.
Different things. Just quickly mention there. Different things we were thinking about. We were hoping for. I think I will own it. I did do the "We Want Sabe" chant. Now that you mentioned it, I remember that.
I mean, you sort of did it twice, and then I think I went, "Sit down."
I think. I don't even know how serious I was about it, but there we go.
It was the opening of Celebration, like, high that you were on. I'm just like, I'm just gonna.
Oh yeah,
That's great.
So what were some of our cold takes other than Sabe? What were we thinking, and why were they wrong?
That's the thing. There wasn't a lot of like theorizing that I think is particularly cold take worthy with Andor, because for that sort of thing, I feel like it, something has to go completely in a different direction than what you're expecting. And I think, as much as Andor had its twists and turns, it was fairly straightforward in its complexity. Like it's a complex story, but at the end of the day, it's about a guy rebelling against the Empire. So every storyline basically revolves around, doing a little bit of that. And, I don't know. I don't think there was a ton of like, oh, I bet so-and-so is going to show up this week, or I bet so-and-so is going to show up this week. If anybody predicted Melchi showing up, I think they can qualify that as not a hot take, but just a good take, just a smart take. Yeah. But like, the two sort of legacy characters that we saw, the two main ones, Saw and Mon Mothma, that aren't Cassian Andor. They were in the trailers. We knew that was coming. Yularen was another one. So I don't know if there were any particularly cold takes on the scale of Cad Bane's not going to show up in this series. Oh, there he is tomorrow, which was happened with me with Bad Batch. So it was so specific.
The origin of cold takes was on,
yeah,
by the way.
it's so specific, such a specific prediction based on like there was no indication that he was ever going to show up. It wasn't like I was trying to debunk something. It just anyways.
I mean, I think something like Bail Organa.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe more about the Senate and the intricacies. You know,
Masameda would have been nice to see.
Yeah, Masameda. Like
where
those
the
kinds
hell
of
was
Easter
Sly
eggs
Moore? Where was Sly Moore? That guy never showed up. He was supposed to show up
somewhere. Yeah, she's
where was he? Where the heck was he?
She? I don't know. Anyway, in the comics,
It's a
she's she.
Oh,
She's
where were they?
A few years later, she's getting in trouble with Darth Vader. But speaking of characters getting in trouble with Darth Vader, yeah, I mean, I still want Sabe to show up in this somehow.
Yeah.
Like, somehow
Is
bring her
Sabe the Keira Knightley one?
Yeah.
Okay. Well then, yeah. Let's get Keira Knightley in Star
Why not?
Wars.
Let's see. Let's bring this up. There we go. that's all for novels. There's probably going to be a Sabe novel coming out by A.K. Johnston. That's my biggest guess. But she did not show up in Andor. I'm okay with it. I can live with it. Fair enough. Anyways, Joel, get us back on track.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, ooh, what's that? Boba Fett. Boba Fett. Where? Yes. It's so. I guess I'll start us off by saying I said that 2022 was the year where it's like my feelings towards the show were good, great. This is the Book of Boba Fett, man. I feel weird. Awkward silence. A show that just has not aged well for me with time. I hate to say it. Like I like episode 2. I liked the Mando episode. I think I liked the Ahsoka episode a bit more. But it's sort of like, I hate to say this, and my buddy Doc kind of said this too. Mm-hmm. It felt like a filler show in almost all the I know I said the F word. In almost all the right ways, because like, why are we like? I don't feel like it's setting up anything. Mm-hmm. It had no connection to the Bad Batch, which had Fennec and had the Omega thing. If it doesn't get continued on in Mando season 3 or get a season 2, why did we do this? And probably Jon Favreau at his weakest writing. I mean, I kind of have this hot take that in a weird way, I think Jon Favreau and J.J. Abrams are kind of in the same caliber of writer. I think Favreau's just like a little higher and kind of gets a little bit more going for him. But I mean, obviously compared to Cody Gilroy, it's like here. But it's like clearly I don't know what happened with him and Rodriguez and Filoni. What went on? It's a complicated one. I'm gonna be honest, not that fun to watch. And even when me and Doc were talking, I said to him, maybe this would have been a better show if it was just Boba Fett just doing action things and for 6 episodes. I mean, it would have been fun and I would have had some fun time. My buddy Doc here, he said 2, 4, 5, and 7 were good episodes. The rest felt like they were struggling to find direction and purpose. Yeah. And I agree. But Dominic, let's throw it to you. Book of Boba Fett, several months out now.
Yeah, it's almost a year since it premiered. It's crazy to think. It almost doesn't feel like it was this year, right? Like, I think about Obi-Wan, I think Andor, and then it's like, oh yeah, and Book of Boba was there too. Yeah, it felt like the most undercooked Star Wars show, in the sense that there's a lot of good ideas in there, and there's a lot of good concepts, and almost none of it was executed properly or to the fullest extent. And I think it was also serving a couple of masters in the sense that yes, it was supposed to be a Boba Fett show on his own, but it also they recognized that it had been a year since the last season of The Mandalorian, and people were missing the characters that were involved in that story. So they wanted to bring them back and give people a little bit, give people season 2.5 of The Mandalorian within the Book of Boba Fett. And they didn't quite mesh that stuff perfectly in there. I think the Mandalorian stuff, if you take those 2 episodes on their own, those are 2 pretty good Mandalorian episodes. It just makes no sense that they're labeled as the Book of Boba Fett. So I think there's that element that's part of it. There's also just like stuff like the mods. I like those characters and I like the idea behind them. Why were the chases so slow?
Yeah,
they were so slow. It was like it was not faster and more intense. They bring in Black Chrysanthemum and like that's really cool, and he delivered on a couple of cool action scenes, but didn't really go anywhere. They brought in the Hutts. That definitely went nowhere.
They went somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, which is a shame because their introduction in episode 2 is terrific. Like, what a great moment! So well done. And the Pikes never really felt like that much of a threat. Cad Bane was cool, but he just kind of they didn't do the work. They didn't do the work to make him to make it to pay off his relationship with Boba Fett, because it's all based on Clone Wars episodes that don't exist. Like, at least if the Clone Wars episodes existed, you could be like, well, go and watch these and then watch that, and it'll make more sense. But they don't exist. There's no version. Like there's like 2 unfinished scenes that are publicly available if you know where to look, and the rest of it is like is just scripts that are buried in the Lucasfilm vault. And so there's some stuff missing there. It just and then the scripts felt undercooked just in general. Like there's that really weird scene, I think it's in episode 3 with Stephen Root's character, where like he asks Boba to go confront the mods, so Boba goes to confront them in this alleyway, and then Stephen Root just happens to be there as well, and you're like, what the heck just happened? It was like a play, which if it were a play, would have been fine as a scene, but it's a movie. It's not a play. You can do editing. You don't have to just use this one space. So that said, episode 2, the Tribes of Tatooine, is a classic Star Wars episode. Like that is one of the best like individual episodes of Star Wars that I think they've done on TV. Like it's really, really good. All of that stuff with the Tuskens and the train robbery. Like, I complain about the speeder chases with the mods. That train robbery was awesome. It's even, I love the one in Solo. I love a good train robbery, just period. The one in Solo was awesome. This one's even better. Like it's so good and so well done. And Boba, going on the adventure with the Tuskens, and then doing the thing with the lizard up his nose, and all of that stuff, and even the stuff in the present in that episode is the best of it. There's lots of good elements in the Book of Boba Fett, but of the shows from this year, it's always the one that's like, oh yeah, that happened too, and it's the one that I feel the least inclination to go back and rewatch. Whereas Andor and Obi-Wan are both shows that I feel like I want to rewatch at least certain parts of them regularly, and the whole thing again soon.
Yeah. Matthew, what thoughts on Book of Boba Fett as it is the year?
Yeah, I'll shine a little bit of a light on it. I agree with what you guys are saying. Undercooked. What's it doing? It was a transitional show between Mandalorian season 2 and season 3, and effectively, and setting up Ahsoka. It was the backdoor pilot for that as well. I wonder if our expectations were set by being called the Book of Boba Fett, and Boba Fett as a whole being the frame for it. If this was more of an anthology, more along the lines of Tales of the Jedi, I think we would have appreciated it more. I think we would have had an expectation set of, okay, here are 3 episodes about Boba Fett. Here's an episode about Din. Here's an episode about Grogu, and then here's another episode about maybe all 3 of them coming together, or at least Din, Grogu, and Boba coming together. So there was that bit. Yeah, episode 2. Yeah, well, you said I think here's my hot take. That episode 2 does the politics better than Andor does. It really, you want to talk about an impactful show that doesn't fully tell. I mean, it's in Tuscan, so is that complicating the not quite the white savior thing because he's also Maori and he's also
Yeah.
so there's
having some of those lines that
Mhm.
that Boba says, having them come out of Tamora Morrison's mouth, it gives them a weight
It does.
that would be undercut if they were coming out of Harrison Ford's mouth or Mark Hamill's mouth, or but because it is coming from an indigenous actor, I think it carries a different it carries a different weight behind it.
So I mean, I kind of maintain. I mean, I haven't really rewatched it much at all, but over the past time as it's stewed, I maintain what I thought at first was, oh, this stuff Boba and Tuscans, if that's the whole series, I'm loving that. But then kind of picked up what you're saying with Jon Favreau. He is like J.J. Abrams, the classic original trilogy action fan, and he is able to probe deeper than J.J. is, but it's in part because he has Filoni right there to ask him the questions to help him do that. And then, I mean, it's not a knock on fun action original trilogy fans. It's just it's never going to be as deep as someone who's studied under George Lucas, So, and just different, or someone like Ryan Johnson who's able to ask the questions that George Lucas was able to ask. So, I mean, I don't know what kind of questions Jon Favreau was asking in that show, and Rodriguez was asking that show, but it felt like, oh, this is a great thing, and then it stops, and then we get the Boba crime lord thing going on, which could have been more, could have had more politics to it, could have had more attention to it. The whole, I mean, the way the train heist is filmed versus the way the speeder chase is filmed, that's a metaphor for the two aspects of the season. Just thinking about this now, this was this exciting, impactful ride with all the train heist with all the political subtext to it, and then you have, I mean, a bit of political subtext to what Boba is trying to do in this town, and that came through. It did. The type of corruption he has to fight against, that came through a little bit, or it came through pretty clearly. It was more tell than not show, but I'll say I don't mind this series. I don't mind it. Even like I remember that Ahsoka episode, I really had trouble with. That had to do with Uncanny Plateau, but that's what Toothpick Watch is really about. But I'll look back and say, okay, I'll rewatch that second episode. I'll probably have to. I mean, for season 3 of Mando, we'll have to watch the Din Djarin episode. I mean, that was critical.
Yeah.
And then for Ahsoka, we'll have to watch that a little bit too. I'm probably for both series, but
I don't want to.
I'm glad we kind of got it, but it could have been framed, it could have been packaged differently. And it speaks to just how powerful packaging is. If it's just, here's an anthology, or here are different standalone things coming out. Here we go.
I don't want to do good. I don't want to make this too much Mando speculation for the future. But it is interesting that I like to jokingly now call the Mandoverse Initiative, because in a weird way, it's like, well, it's kind of like the High Republic. It's different stories telling one mega story.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if they are deciding, you know what, we're going to do what the High Republic did, and it's like, well, you better watch Mando season 1 and 2, then Book of Boba Fett season 1, then Mando season 3, then Ahsoka season 1, then Skeleton Crew season 1, and then Mando season 4.
Sound
and
like
that's
the
how
DC shows.
And then that's how the whole Mando story plays out, because when it's time to get to Mando 4, the past 2 series will have informed what happened then, and maybe Thrawn is the villain. I don't know. Or I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they'll do a crossover event series as its own thing. That's not really its own thing. But I do think they could have balanced out the Boba standalone thing from the from the other things. Although who knows? Like maybe I saw the writers list on Mando season 3, and Dave Filoni's already on 2 episodes, so we know something's going to be set up. So we already know something's going to happen. But
yeah, we know a few good things about that.
But obviously, Grogu's back was Din. I know people are not happy about that. It's whether or not you think that because shouldn't this have happened at the end of Mando? But if you consider Book of Boba part of the Mando initiative, maybe I should call it the New Republic initiative since it's in the era of the New Republic. But
that would make sense if they actually talked about the New Republic.
That's true. The Mando
there were supposed to be
initiative.
some Rangers.
That's
yeah,
true.
a Ranger that we're a fan of, but
That's true. But I think they probably need to balance out maybe a little bit, but it's all on Disney Plus. A couple of thoughts from our buddy Doc. He thinks we're gonna get the Boba Cad Bane story and animation soon. I saw this and I'm like, oh, Darth Bane, and I'm like, oh no, Strong Bane.
Cad Bane.
And I'm sure that you'll appreciate this, Matthew. A Book of Boba
Sorry.
Hashtag Book of Boba Fett season 2. Hashtag Kira watch. Cross his fingers that Kira lives. I hope so.
I'm groaning. It'd be fun, but
You think the moment has passed?
I think Charles Soule has Kira's story in the grip of his cold, ironclad hands, and he ain't letting go. And I'm happy for it because he's doing a great job with it. Yeah.
But yeah, finally, let's talk about him. The man, the myth, the Lord and Savior, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I love making
Anakin Skywalker, what?
Yeah, Kenobi. As I said, is my thing. Great. I love Kenobi. I still think Andor is still my favorite, or at least this is my dislike best made thing coming in from the beginning because I do think Andor was the best made. But Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's like the total opposite of Book of Boba Fett. It's a character piece. It really works because I think the whole thing works. Like with Book of Boba Fett, I can pick out certain episodes, like episode 2 and episode 5, but the whole just kind of fall flat. Here, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the whole really works. Like the whole shebang, Obi-Wan's arc with Anakin, with Reva, with Leia, really works. And obviously, while this is also very much a show about Star Wars because it's about Obi-Wan Kenobi, it is essentially episode 3.5. I don't think you could really escape that and kind of get out of a genre the same way kind of Andor could. I think this is probably, for what it's worth, one of the better executed. Here's a legacy character. Let's do something with them. And it builds upon the prequels, originals, and I think even the sequels with putting Leia front and center of this story, outside of Obi-Wan, of course, and kind of elevating her, which I think they've been doing since the sequel started. To George made her Luke's sister last minute. Now we got to work backwards to make this work, and I think they did a good job of that. I love the final episode, of course, of Obi-Wan. I think that's one of those examples of why an ending can be so important. Cause I kind of get maybe episode 4 is not my favorite. I really liked episode 5 though, and the previous 3 beforehand. But that final episode really just elevated the rest of it. And I think having a really good solid ending can really elevate any problem you might have had with the rest of the series overall. And there were some few CGI suspicions those snow speeders still don't look that great. But overall, one of my favorite of the Disney Plus series this year. I think I might like it more than Andor, but that's just kind of
Really?
That's sort of again. I go back and forth whether or not I like it more or less.
That surprises me. But...
I definitely enjoy that last episode quite a lot, but I just love a good Obi-Wan versus Vader duel, and get to see Palpatine again in some really good Palpatine makeup. Really, it's the best looking since Return of the Jedi. And I was so glad this really happened, and I think it was amazing and fun to watch. But Dominic, again, over to you, Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when I hear people talk about the show, I feel like I'm being gaslit because I'll hear people say it say it was a disappointment or a letdown or all this stuff. I'm like, what on earth are you talking about?
Yeah.
First of all, where was this when it was on? Because I didn't hear any of it when it was on. And second of all, what show were you watching? I mean, again, as we were talking about earlier, people respond to different things in different ways. Everyone's opinion, everybody's allowed to have their own opinion. I'm not in the business of policing people's opinions. Things you like it or you don't. But to me, like this, I can think of like almost nothing that would make this show better. I think from start to finish, it delivers on everything I was hoping for. And you know, I didn't go into it with. I went into it with high expectations in the sense that I wanted it to be good, but I didn't go into it with specific expectations. You know, I know a lot of people went into it wanting like Clone Wars era flashbacks and all sorts of stuff like that. And I never felt that was what was right for this story. And I think what we got was what was right for this story. And you know, the heart of the story being the relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Princess Leia, something we'd never really considered before, just landed so beautifully. And you know, I remember we were talking about episode 4 on Star Wars Underworld podcast, and I can't remember if it was Chris or Ben, or it might have been both of them. We're sort of saying like, this episode feels like this is, of all the episodes, it's the most skippable. And I'm like, you can't skip it. It's essential to the Leia Obi-Wan story. It all centers around that moment at the end where she grabs his hand, and you have this sort of connection between the two of them. Finally, you see the Obi-Wan's finally opening up again in a way that he hasn't, and it's with Anakin's child, and how meaningful that is for him, and just for her, the fact that she trusts him now, and everything. Like, it's such a beautiful little moment that you needed that episode to build up to that moment, and you needed that moment in the whole series. And the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan, or Vader and Obi-Wan, gets all the press, and rightfully so. It's terrific, and the moment with Hayden, where you can see Hayden's face through the mask, is just tremendous. It's so good. That, like, it was a bit of a running joke on our show. I'd always say Kenobi is perfection, and I do mean that. Even though the ships move wrong in all of the scenes. I don't know what went on there, but the ships moved wrong. But yeah, I this is one that, like, I've yet to hear a criticism of it that resonates with me. That's not to say people have to feel the same way I do, or those criticisms aren't valid for other people. But for me, like, I think there's nothing about this, nothing you can say about this show other than, why do the ships move wrong? That takes away from my enjoyment of it. And even that is such a small thing in the grand scope of it. But they got the story absolutely right. Obi-Wan's story, Anakin's story, Leia's story, even the little bit of Luke's story and Uncle Owen's story and Reva's story, and everything, just start to finish. I thought it was terrific.
And Padme's story. I mean,
Padme's story. Yeah.
So the thing with all the prequel references, all the prequel flashbacks, they're happening in Obi-Wan's mind. Yeah. We can see Ewan McGregor thinking about them, remembering, because this is a story taking place at this time of someone who would remember these events from 9 years in the past and beyond. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny. This show had the opposite to do for me than Andor. It had to take my favorite fiction story of all time. I'm not exaggerating. My favorite film of all time, the greatest film of all time, and continue and look back on its implications. And, good luck. Just the weight of that was difficult. And I'll say, for me, it actually does come down to what we were talking before with technical versus affective, in that, you can talk about the ships that didn't, because of the volume, and the volume limited the visual element, the visual depth that this show could have. But then within that, they really told an incredibly moving, touching story that pulls on and plays with everything we love about Revenge of the Sith. Everything I love about, say, Charles Soule's Vader comic, right? And Kieran Gillen's Vader comic, right? And Rebels, the Ahsoka moment in Rebels, every time we've seen a crack in the mask,
Yeah.
There's this bit of Anakin coming out, and this question, my favorite question in Star Wars, what's the relationship between Anakin and Vader?
Mm.
You have to deal with it, and you deal with it in the way the other characters perceive him. And so it did struggle under the weight of all of my expectations. I have to admit that. I think, yeah, that fight in just outside that village in the dark with the flames, it could have been more. It could have been scarier. It could have been more intense. It could have been faster and more intense. In the middle, it kind of felt like that. Those ones kind of felt like, okay, what's happening? Where's this going? But then, yeah, you get the legacy characters of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and of Leia, who's also a legacy character, moving their stories forward, diving deeper, and then you get this new character who knocks it out of the park. Moses Ingram knocks it out of the park. Got to mention that. Reva, yes, she. This is a redemption story for her, which people are asking for a non-redemption story, which is fair. I think other stories can do that. You really see again the legacy of Order 66 and of these events on these kids that may have survived somehow, and how it messed them up. So, yeah, I mean, again, my feeling about this show is kind of mixed, in part because, again, probably because of the expectations I had of it, because a lot of the stuff is dealt with in comics as well. Maybe the best thing I can say then is to say everything I love about the Charles Soule comic and the Kieran Gillen comic gets to be shared with everyone else, and you all, I mean, everything that worked about those stories, about that reflection on the relationship between Anakin and Vader, and even Greg Pak's comic does continue this as well, especially with the legacy of Padme in Anakin's story. Everyone gets to experience that, and of course we got to experience that on the big screen. I know, Joel, first of all, great job, you actually spelled theater right in the notes. Theatre, the proper spelling. Yeah, seeing it all together in once, to answer that question, for me, it really helped connect things, helped me see the connections, just how Reva is the first character we see in the whole series. We don't know that in the beginning. How Obi-Wan's boss in the meat plant comes up and encounters and buds in line for the water at the end, those little things. But of course, the big flow, the scope of it, that kind of glut in the middle isn't as important, because you're jumping through and you're getting to the meat of the story. Seeing Padawan Anakin on a big screen, I actually had tears in my eyes. It was
it's pretty great.
So they went there, and they went there. Credit to everyone in Lucasfilm and everyone in Deborah Chow especially for going there and saying, this is a story that is so profoundly meaningful, the most meaningful part of Star Wars for so many of us. And we're going to explore why that is, what that's about, and what that means in the transition to that part of Star Wars that's so meaningful for an older generation. How does Obi-Wan go from picking up the saber on Mustafar to giving it to Luke on Tatooine?
Yeah. And you mentioned, something about Obi-Wan that I feel like is it's the thing that I love about this new era of Star Wars, where they call it Star Wars Forever. It will never end until the world ends. Is in some ways, and I'm not thinking this as like a prequel criticism. It just, I think this is for all of them, all 9. Is it can finally do the things the film never got to do, or we never got to show or redeem aspects or something. So like the 2 big things for me that Obi-Wan did that I really love seeing just in general was, A, we finally got the Qui-Gon moment that I think a lot of people were slightly disappointed at the end of Revenge of the Sith. But 2, and this is the big one for me, it showed Luke had a good upbringing. Owen and Beru loved Luke, and he had a good home, and I think there's a group of fans who are like, Owen Brew, who cares? They die and they serve their purpose. And like, no, they were Luke's parents. They were more Luke's mom and dad than his actual mom and dad. Same with Vale and Bria. They were her real parents. Deck with blood. Deck was Anakin's blood, I say. They were her, Bail Organa is Leia's dad, and, Baru and Uncle Owen is Luke's dad because he taught him proper values, proper Tatooine farm values. But no, like, they showed, like, these kids came from loving homes with parents who cared about them. And, it's just good to see, on the whole, that those sorts of extra things that maybe the movies couldn't cover or didn't have time to cover. So that's one of my big things about the Kenobi series for me that I really liked. Good comment, by the way, from buddy Holocron, where he kind of puts into perspective all three of these shows. Like, Obi-Wan was The Force Awakens, Boba was The Rise of Skywalker, and Andor, The Last Jedi. I kind of agree with that in terms of, maybe not 1-to-1, but it's sort of like, one was sort of well put together, but also like, mostly liked until internet discourse backlash happens. Boba was definitely the thing that was undercooked, felt rushed, felt like there were so many masters, and then Andor sort of the one that really shook up things and challenged us in a way. But yeah, that was my big thing for Obi-Wan as well.
I mean, what Dom, I want to just ask you because I mean, we haven't talked too much about it, but whenever the Scotiabank Theater event was at the end of Andor, end of Kenobi, until now, like, how do you look back on that event? How did you feel it affected the way you watched the series?
It was like the perfect like end credit scene after Star Wars Celebration kind of thing. It was like one more day to just go somewhere with a bunch of Star Wars fans and see something really cool in Star Wars that's in kind of a unique, special way. There were lots of screenings of the Kenobi finale around the world. And in Australia, they did the last 2 episodes and they put it in IMAX, which was pretty awesome. And across Canada, they screened the last episode in theaters. And so there's all sorts of that stuff. But nobody, the Scotiabank Theater one that we went to, like, that was unique in the world, that it was all 6 episodes and that the creatives were there, that Deborah Chow and Hayden Christensen were there. And to get to be in the same room as them and hear them talk about it now that it was done and that they could say whatever they wanted to about it. There was no dancing around spoilers with this thing. And for Hayden to sort of get to his moment again, another moment of appreciation. And I noticed that, Hayden snuck into the theater to actually watch the last episode with people. And I saw him and his security guards scurrying out as the credits were rolling. And just sort of these moments like that. And to see the show on the big screen as well. It fixed some of the like technical issues. The ships still move wrong, but the lightsabers looked way better on the movie screen than they did on TV. I don't know why. I don't know what it was, but I remember thinking about that duel in the fire. I guess that's in episode 3. I want to say, like that duel on TV, I thought it looked good, but something seemed off about it. The lightsabers felt like glow sticks rather than lightsabers. But seeing it on the big screen, they looked like lightsabers, and the way that they communicated the story through color was so good. So I look at that as like it absolutely enhanced my experience of the series as a whole. And I just look at it as a really sort of special day that we were lucky enough to experience through a little bit of good luck and a little bit of making our own luck.
Cinema Club.
Santa,
we're not sponsored by Cinema Club. We should be. But
it should be. Yeah. Well, I mean, we found that listing on the Cineplex website, or I think we found it through like the Star Wars Leaks Reddit or whatever. And we're trying to figure out how to get there. And Matthew, because you have the Cine Club, you were able to get tickets first. You were able to get them.
I got an email. I literally got an email.
And you got 2 tickets. And so at first it was just going to be you and me were going to go.
Yeah.
It was just the 2 of us. And then I think they moved the event into a bigger theater at the Cineplex, and Disney PR then all of a sudden was like, hey, sent Star Wars Underworld an email, was like, hey, you guys want to come? And I was like, I will take 2 more tickets, please. And so we were able to get Din and Kareem in. And so, it was a bit of luck that, we were in the right place at the right time, but also we made our own luck by, being a subscriber to Cine Club and doing this ridiculous podcasting thing for 10 years. So it worked out like that. And I just look back on it as a wonderful, exciting, thrilling day.
So Cineplex, if you're listening, we will take more perks,
and
we will plug
too.
you.
Yes.
And Disney,
too. Yeah.
we will take the perks. We will plug you. Cineplex, especially loving, not just Cineplex, but Deborah Chow and English. And I've said this before. This city here is a fun city to be a Star Wars fan in. So
and just the two of them just being there. Like, I got to have a little moment with Deborah Chow.
Yeah,
just got to say thanks for making the show. It's awesome. And she appreciated it, and she also appreciated the fact that Din and I hadn't seen the episodes yet, that we had managed to avoid watching the finale until we got there.
I watched it in the morning.
Yeah, you and Kareem were just like, give it to me, we need it, and
we're
like, hold on, get to end of day when we'll see it on big screen.
Speaking of Din, he's back from the subway trip.
From the underground.
Yeah, the underground. Seeing the damaged helmet, seeing the way Hayden's face was able to move, it just something about the size, the detail we're able to see. There we go. He has also had experiences with Deborah Chow. I won't go to that.
He told that story on an episode of Star Wars Underworld. So go listen to Din's last appearance, which I think was an Andor episode.
Hayden had like a really good scary face of like just when he's quiet and gets like the glare. It's like, oh yeah, that's Darth Vader under there.
Like you said, he goes to his process goes to. I remember very clear. He thinks about Anakin. He goes to Anakin, and he keeps going. Right, as how is Anakin in his rage and his sense of betrayal just held on to that for 10 years, 9 years. Yeah,
agreed.
It was fantastic.
We talked a little. We were going to talk about themes of like what this means. I feel like we talked about that throughout the whole show, so I'm going to skip that part. But one more thing, and that is next year. What are we looking forward to? One thing in terms of a theme that I do want to point out is that I noticed this in terms of the shows: Mando, Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew, Acolyte. Sorry, all these shows, with the exception of maybe Ahsoka, but I kind of have a bit of a wiggle room with her. None of them are legacy characters. These are all about the original Disney created characters, with the exception of Ahsoka.
I think Ahsoka's a legacy character at this point.
She's a Skywalker.
Full
on.
I think once you've been around for 10 years, you get the legacy character.
That's true. I mean, I kind of have this weird thing because like Dave Filoni's still shepherding her character arc, so it's still the original person. So it's kind of like not like
that's a really interesting way of looking at that. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like like 7, 8, 9 was like they're continuing George's thing, but George isn't there. Kenobi, George started in, but George wasn't there. Boba Fett, George wasn't there either. So the George created characters. Not that I don't think you need the original creator to shepherd these characters, obviously, but that's just sort of my odd look at it. But it's sort of interesting, like the next phase of the shows, all original characters, and if there are to be any of the big leagues, they're gonna probably be background characters. Like if Luke shows up, it's gonna be like for one episode and that's it, he's done. Maybe Mon Mothma will show up, but he's probably gonna be in the background. It's Din and Jaren and whoever the Skeleton Crew people are, they are the stars. And Bad Batch season 2. Thank you, Duck. Thank you, Duck. Bad Batch season 2. Again, the original characters. So minus some. So I guess I'll start by saying minus some concerning reports about the actual crew. We're here, support you, unionize, fight for your rights, buddies. I'm actually really looking forward to Skeleton Crew for a few reasons. One, it's a Mandoverse Initiative show that isn't going to be written by Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni. It's going to be this other guy, and the director, obviously, John Watts. I love John Watts because I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man trilogy. Yeah. It's honestly my favorite version of Spider-Man. So I'm kind of curious how that plays in the Mandoverse when Favreau decides, okay, I'm actually going to step back and just produce, but not write. Um, Also, original characters, an original premise. So I'm hoping it's really exciting, and obviously Acolyte. I'm so excited for Acolyte. Obviously, but that's in a couple years' time. I don't think that's going to be 2023 and beyond.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm looking forward to those two the most. But Dominic, what about you? Again, throw it to
Yeah.
you. What are you looking forward to, and what are your takeaways for the upcoming years?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Just-
next year really looks to be the year of the Mandoverse. After Mando, kind of, it let's be honest, it carried Disney Plus through the first 2 years, and that second year was 2020, which involved was the first year of COVID. So the all through that first year of COVID, at the end of it, there was the shining light of the Mandalorian to look forward to.
Yeah.
It was like Mandalorian and your vaccine. It's the end of the year. Just hold on. But it was. It was such a big part of it, and then it's kind of been on a little bit on pause. Boba factored into it, but we've seen what Star Wars can be outside of it on Disney Plus, and with Bad Batch and Clone Wars season 7, and of course Obi-Wan Kenobi and Andor. And now we're gonna kind of go back to it and kind of go full throttle into it, where I think it's certainly conceivable, if not likely, that all 3 live action Star Wars shows next year will be in the Mandoverse. I think we're definitely getting Mandalorian season 3, definitely Ahsoka, and I think I just saw that there's a Disney Plus promo out previewing next year that features like a very, very, very fast shot of Jude Law in Skeleton Crew. So unless they cram a fourth live action show in there that Acolyte's ready in time or something, which seems unlikely, it looks like it'll be all Mandoverse all the time next year, which is really exciting, and it'd really be fun to see where that story goes after spending so long speculating about the potential for this wider story with the Mandalorian, to actually get to see that play out, beginning with the Mandalorian in March.
That guy.
Yeah. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to that. And I think that's just so exciting. And then 2024 could shift away from the Mandoverse. It could shift away with Acolyte and Andor. And I think they cram Mando season 4 in there as well. I feel like they get all of them in there. But yeah, it's real exciting and real good stuff to look forward to.
I always liken these releases to like book releases these days. I actually once said that Andor is like reading a James Luceno book. And the way I kind of look at it is like, it'd be like if next year we only get High Republic books, and then the year after that we get the Jedi Fallen Order book and that Inquisitor book, which have nothing to do with the High Republic initiative. But Matthew, what are you looking forward to, and why is it Acolyte?
I'm looking forward to a year full of High Republic books.
Sign me up for that too.
Also, a High Republic-ish series called The Acolyte. I mean, ultimately large, long term. That's the phrase. Looking forward to The Acolyte the most, especially delving into the end of the High Republic era and again the Space Wizards, and also how it gets from point A to point B. That the whole High Republic publishing initiative is ultimately about, as I've said multiple times, it's how they get from we are all the Republic and we are this literal beacon of shining light, coming to coming to bring peace to the galaxy, trying to bring peace to the galaxy, running into trouble, to hey, clones, we're gonna go fight a war, why not? Execute Order 66. How do they get there? This is gonna be this fascinating and challenge. It's gonna be a challenge for them to do this successfully, but fascinating piece in that story, and that really, I mean, the story I'm deeply invested in through the High Republic, but even, I mean, I was invested as a prequelist, right? There. So that in terms of 2023 and the near term, I mean, sure, I'm gonna love Ahsoka. I think I'm finally inching my way up to uncanny plateau with her, from from what I've seen, it looks a lot better. So then just getting used to the look of her in this era and live action. So that I'll get over that, especially when I'm sucked into the story of what she's up to, what she's diving into maybe the world between worlds and everything that's come before. It's interesting how she doesn't entirely feel like a legacy character, Joel, in part because what we were saying, Filoni moving her story forward, but also because, or Filoni shepherding a story, but also because there's so much more of her story for us to explore. She is younger than Luke and Leia were in the sequel trilogy. Luke and Leia and Han were in the sequel trilogy. So, what is she like as this master, effectively a Jedi master? Having gone through, I mean, she's my favorite TV character of all time. Gone through all of these experiences, including being betrayed by the Order in Order 66 and everything, the rebellion, and seeing Vader's face and all that stuff. Filoni's definitely going to have in mind how that affects her. Most immediate thing I'm looking forward to is whatever it is Katie Sackhoff meant when she said the most favorite thing she's filmed, the most favorite thing she's done as Bo-Katan hasn't happened yet. It's happening in season 3. And this was at Fan Expo. Dom, you had to go to work just as she said that. I was a fan of, it was Fan Expo. That really got me wondering, what is this Mandalore story going to be? How does that explore themes of tradition and loyalty and needing to adapt and innovate who you are as a people, and just this fascinating, layered, complex character that Favreau, Filoni, and the writers and Katie Sackhoff herself have brought together and constructed. And then, of course, our buddy Paul Sunheringly, buddy, Patrono Carson Teva, what he gets up to, and if that starts to connect things going on Chandrila and at the Galactic Core a little more, because I mean that's the one thing I'm really missing in this time period. I mean, because I know we're going to get the Space Wizards. I'm missing, again, I've said this before, a serious look at the New Republic in this time. So yeah, I'm excited. I think it is going to, like we said, it is going to start to hit on all these different scratch all these different itches that all fans have by digging in, and of course streaming television. It has the time to do it, and they've had the track record of doing it well. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun few years on Disney Plus, at least for Star Wars.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope Carson Teva. I feel like a certain character was going to take the role as our pro New Republic character, but they got fired. So I hope Carson Teva kind of takes the role like, okay, he's our New Republic representative. In terms of adjusting, I think, Matthew, I got to get you adjusted to the fact that I think Thrawn's going to be a villain. I think he's going to be.
Well, I'm ready for that too.
Okay.
I'm just saying the reason, because he's not really a villain in the Zahn prequel trilogy. So
I mean, even more of a villain. Like, he's working with dark side cultists, and like he did in the original. Like, he's okay with like blowing people up.
Tell me a good story about that. Although one thing, and that brings to mind one thing. I know this could be a very cold take. This could be a frigid take. But how much is Bad Batch connected to the Mandoverse? Everything going on with cloning, Camino, and all that stuff, Mount Tantus. So I don't know. I don't think explicitly. I don't think they're going to go there too far. But there's Cad Bane. There's here I go blanking on a character's name. Melinda May from
Fennec.
Yeah, Fennec Shand. There we go. Yeah. So it's possible. It's possible. Again, that's animated, but definitely. I mean, with Filoni around, animated is screen canon.
Yeah,
it's certainly Mandoverse adjacent for sure.
Yeah.
Dominic, is there a story plot for you that you're looking forward to in terms of the Mandoverse with Thrawn, or what kind of the overarching story of this Mandoverse would be?
I'm just sort of along for the ride right now. It's it's really, really exciting what they're working on. And there's so many interesting pieces on the board. And I'm sure there are more pieces that have yet to be introduced. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they all fit together.
Mhm.
And that's all I'm gonna say for now.
All right.
Oh boy.
Your
I mean,
cold takes,
yeah.
Jeff.
I might know what may be Dominic talking about if we're following the same trails.
Mm.
But
I'm not, so I'm completely in the dark.
we won't say anything.
Yeah,
But
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. Much like one day, if I have the power, the mental power to do so, I too kind of want to binge read the High Republic again, just to kind of see the whole thing. I'm actually rewatching Mando season 1 and 2, and I'm gonna be honest, I forgot how good that show was.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I will, in terms of, like, again, the craftsmanship, I think Andor is probably the best crafted. But dang, you know what, Mando season 1 and 2, it's a lot of fun. It's very rewatchable. Sometimes I can feel like I just feel like watching this episode of Mando. Click. And I can't wait, like you, to binge watch the Mandoverse initiative, including Book of Boba, just to kind of see where it comes on. And hopefully once this is all done, we'll get a High Republic, not a High Republic, a New Republic character in Carson Teva to be our representative for that faction. If Leia is sort of like the rebellion representative in terms of the group of Han represents the smugglers and Luke the Jedi. It's a bit more complicated than that, but I feel like they kind of play a role in that regard.
I mean, I
and
still want
yeah.
my Mon Mothma West Wing of cards in space, but don't know if
Tony
that's going to
Gilroy,
happen
do
yet.
you want to do a New Republic era show? Please come back.
Yeah, Tony
So-
Gilroy and Aaron Sorkin in a room together. Can you imagine?
I'd settle just for Bradley Whitford being
Yeah,
cast
yeah,
in something.
Yeah, Bradley Whitford just yelling at somebody.
Yeah,
yelling at
that's
his
all I
aide.
want. That's all I want. I just want him in Star Wars. I want a scene between Bradley Whitford and Mon Mothma.
But Bradley Whitford yelling at his aide for bagels. Best bagels in all the galaxy.
Sinjir? He's gonna play Sinjir? That's awesome. You don't remember who Sinjir is?
Yeah,
I remember the
Rasputin. Oh,
name.
yeah, Rasputin,
I remember the
yeah.
name. but,
Aftermath book. Read the Aftermath book.
He's the ISB loyalty officer turned rebel.
Who became Mon Mothma's advisor.
Yeah.
Ah.
And one of the first openly gay characters in
True.
new canon.
Nice.
But yeah. That's that. I think in terms of like the big kind of Star Wars doing an MCU kind of thing, it's still struggling a little bit. Book of Boba Fett is an indicator of that. I hope Skeleton Crew and Ahsoka are kind of they both stand on their own, but obviously they gotta be part of the bigger story, and I hope they find that balance. I agree. Kind of my hot take on this in terms of just a prediction. I always said Ahsoka doesn't die. I think like Gandalf, she'll just head to Valinor in the west, or Mortis,
I actually think
in this
that's
case.
what's gonna. I think she's Ahsoka Eternal. I think that I actually do speculate something about that. Yeah,
The task is done.
Yeah.
Whatever that task is. So much. I'm curious again how this connects to the sequel trilogy or stands on its own as well in terms of the wider timeline, the status quo shifts, etc., and the story plots that it can also spring up for in terms of stuff beyond the Mandoverse, but maybe even beyond Rise of Skywalker. I would not be surprised if one day Rey and Teen Grogu meet each other one day. Rebel Teen Grogu, who's just a bad guy doing the bad thing, but he's got a good heart.
Jason Syndulla, get him in there.
Jason Syndulla. Ooh, I mean, he thinks post CT her task will be done, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So, who knows? We will find out this year, maybe.
Well,
but
sometime,
or sometime this year. But yeah, and I think that is going to do it. We did it. Yay, year in review 2022. We didn't talk about Tales of the Jedi. I'm sorry for animation fans. We just wanted to talk about the big stories, but we did love that show.
Yes.
I'll just throw this down. Quick thoughts on Tales of the Jedi. Just quick thoughts.
Loved it. Loved the Dooku stuff in particular. I hope they do more.
Yeah.
Same here.
Thanks.
Same here. But yeah, that's gonna do us. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And as Joel said, it's a good time to wrap things up. And I guess I'll reiterate that thanks for everyone for joining us. Great comments, great conversation in the chat. Dom, you have the honor of coming like our two longest episodes. Well, I think our High Republic Phase 1 recap was our longest, and then with Chris Abbott, and then tonight getting in deep, going just about Star Wars Underworld length.
Yeah.
And I'm not tired, but I do need to go to bed and go to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'll put that out there. Yeah, and thanks. So yeah, Dom, especially thank you for.
So you're
for
saying
joining us.
you don't want my treatise on what next year should it be? This should be only take me about 7 hours to get
I'm
through.
saying I want you to come back next week.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Actually, yes, I do want you to come back next week, and I'll tell you why in a second. For now, I'll tell you get that in a minute. Yes, thanks everyone for watching, sticking with us for 2.5 hours. Really great conversation. Really one of my favorite episodes we've done. If you liked what you said, liked what you heard, liked what you saw, have some thoughts, please do feel free to keep adding in the comments below. Please do this, give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the Star Wars Underworld channel if you haven't done so already. Okay, now we'll get to the plugs. Dom, where can they find you? First of all, thanks for joining us yet again. Thanks for being a solid friend, more importantly, and again, thanks for giving your thoughts.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for the platform, and also being a solid friend, both of you. And it was great fun. Check out Star Wars Underworld on Thursdays, this channel, or on the on your Spotify's and your Apple Podcasts. Breaking down everything. Although I don't know if we'll have another episode this year. We might be just sort of cruising into 2023 when we'll be back for Bad Batch, but who knows? We might have a little something in the week between Christmas and New Year's. So stay tuned.
At the very least, we got to figure out how to get Hannah into the Star Wars trivia contest. So we'll figure that out. Where can they find you on the internet?
I'm at Dominic J25 on most social medias. I've pretty much given up on the Bird app, and so I mainly stick to the camera app. Instagram. Much prefer that. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Joel, thanks for leading this the discussion on the shows, on live action, etc. And of course we're coming up on a year. Just maybe a month shy on a year. We're coming up on episode 50 also. So yeah, thanks for all your thoughts tonight, and also where can they find you on the internet?
First off, I gotta give some shout outs again. # Mando Season 3, # Nala Say Watch, and for you, Matthew, # Ashlike, # Geode Watch.
Amen.
Doc,
I'm gonna commit to before you go. Doc, I'm gonna commit. If that happens, I will absolutely be on your YouTube channel talking about that. I commit. Yes. Anyway, sorry, I'll show it.
And also one more thing, because Ben sent this to me on the Discord, a little behind the scenes fun. Our thumbnail, which I said which is best, has apparently gotten us 102 comments already, because I asked the question of which of the three, Andor, Kenobi, or Boba was the best, because I wanted to have a kind of a clickbait thumbnail, and it worked. So
there we go. Why not?
But yes, you can find. I'm still on the Bird app. You can find me at JID 2021. Again, JID 2021, or follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod on Twitter, because it's really the only app I really know how to work really well. We're going down with the ship, the horrible ship, and all. We're gonna fight for it. I hope it stays afloat a little bit till the fire stops. That's where you can find me, where I post random thoughts, or on the Ion Cannon Pod, where I post very long threads of in-depth analysis on constitutional society. Yes. Thank you, Doc. Yes.
Yeah.
Golden Doc, my buddy. Yeah. But yeah, that's where you can find us. On Twitter.
Yeah, Elon Musk, please don't do your worst to us. We're small potatoes. Just leave us alone. Yes, because we're on Twitter. Yeah, as Joel said, I'm on Twitter personally. NEUG485. The World Cup is over, so still getting to beat about soccer, but also Star Wars, Star Trek, etc. The goings on all over the place. And at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANON POD on both the Bird app and the Click app. the picture app, Instagram. Instagram, I will admit, is primarily about Tractor Beam right now, which is all I've gotten to do getting there. But yeah, I mean, especially if you want to look at all the Tractor Beam episodes, it's there. Tractor Beam, of course, my weekly comic book reviews dropping every Friday. That is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So are all the full-length episodes of the Iron Canon podcast, audio only, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah, I think that about does it. Follow us again. Also follow the flagship at the SWU. Let us know if you want in on Discord. Click the link below. Yeah, that about does it. Next week we have Dom. Please do come back and give your not 7-minute dissertation if you want. We're doing the great unboxing day guest show. Having guests come on in and give their thoughts on the year that was and the year that will be in Star Wars.
I'm glad someone's carrying that legacy forward, because I used to do that, and it's a lot of work, and I've given up on it. So.
Yeah, well, to be fair, all we've got to do is just pivot people in now. But
yeah,
yeah, it'll be fun. We did that for Attack of the Clones and Celebration back in May, and so that worked pretty well. So we're doing it again.
If we want big views, Dominic and I gotta go up against each other and talk about Rise of Skywalker. Man.
Oh, there we go. There. So that'll be interesting. Yeah. You and Din need to debate. No, I don't know if that'll work. That won't go well. Anyway, so yeah, next week we are continuing on. Check out the trivia, but don't check it out if you're actually competing, because they give away the answers. Yeah, and but until then, Dom, Joel, let us actually blow this thing, not literally. Proverbially blow this thing and head home.